Your favorite crab meat pizza has arrived, Mom. Enjoy to your heart's content. As my daughter-in-law places the plate before me, her kindness seems out of character. I can't help but question this abrupt shift. It strikes me that my eldest child and his wife might be orchestrating some scheme, using food as their tool. Their history of hostility and past attempts to deceive me weigh heavily on my mind. The lavishness of this pizza only adds to my skepticism. Their sudden display of kindness feels more like a calculated move than genuine warmth. Trusting them blindly would be naive. It's clear they're plotting something. I refuse to be underestimated. I possess the capability to defend myself and reverse any situation if necessary. My name is Mary, a housewife in her 60s. Since my husband's passing years ago, I've lived alone. Initially, when my eldest child and their spouse proposed I move in with them, I declined. They were newlyweds, and I wanted them to relish that special phase. Nevertheless, they insisted on residing nearby out of concern for my well-being, a gesture for which I was genuinely appreciative. Their frequent visits, despite my reassurances that they needn't feel obligated, were a testament to their caring nature. My eldest child would often express worry, prompting me to relent and indulge their concern. Similarly, my daughter-in-law sought opportunities to foster a bond with me even when my eldest was occupied. I took pride in my child's choice of partner, believing her to be a person of integrity. However, I was oblivious to their ulterior motives at the time, a realization that now vexes me. Reflecting on those moments, I am irked by my own gullibility. Genuine kindness without hidden agendas is a rarity. I allowed myself to be swayed by their eloquent assurances, oblivious to the underlying truth. It wasn't until later that I uncovered their true intentions. One evening, they dropped by and ended up staying overnight, citing a lack of plans for the following day. Though I hesitated to encroach on their time as a couple, suggesting they return home since it was nearby, my daughter-in-law was insistent. "We're eager to strengthen our bond, so we'd like to stay," she asserted. Reluctantly, I acquiesced, offering them the guest room. This house, a creation of my late husband, holds many unused rooms since it's too large for just me. Despite its dustiness, my daughter-in-law graciously assisted in tidying up, showcasing her adeptness at housework and reinforcing my favorable opinion of her. In the quiet of night, I stirred, parched, and made my way to the kitchen. En route, I noticed the living room bathed in light. Intrigued, I peered in, finding them seated on the sofa engaged in conversation. Unable to resist the temptation, I surreptitiously listened in, inadvertently overhearing a dialogue between my eldest child and his wife. "I'm utterly drained," remarked the eldest child. "That old lady has us toiling like slaves, don't you agree?" "Just endure a little longer," the wife countered. "Once we secure Mom's inheritance, we're free. If her husband hadn't been a CEO, we wouldn't be in this predicament. It's astounding how easily she's deceived just because we're cordial to her. Mom's always been emotionally fragile. She'll likely bestow the inheritance upon us." I was dumbfounded by what I overheard. If their words held truth, then their kindness was merely a facade to lay claim to my late husband's estate. Had all their previous gestures been insincere? Every word they uttered to me were family bound to support each other, or so I thought. Why this fixation on the inheritance? I couldn't discern any financial troubles on his part, but perhaps he's entangled in dire straits unbeknownst to me. What drives them to such lengths for an inheritance? Is it solely for monetary gain? The behavior of the couple left me pondering, perplexed by their motives. I resolved to confront them about their recent conduct. Through inquiries within the neighborhood and among acquaintances, a startling revelation surfaced. Both of them were deeply entrenched in gambling, having accumulated an overwhelming debt far beyond their means to repay through conventional employment. It dawned on me why they were so desperate for the inheritance. My late husband had bequeathed a substantial portion to our eldest child, albeit less than what I received, yet still a sizable sum. They had recklessly squandered it, plunging into insurmountable debt. Their kindness, it seemed, was merely a guise to secure the inheritance from me. Following this discovery, I grew wary of their intentions. "Do you require any assistance, Mom? We're here to lend a hand," my daughter-in-law inquired, her words ringing hollow in light of the unsettling truth. "Your favorite crab meat pizza is here," my daughter-in-law announced cheerfully as she placed the plate before me. "Mom, eat as much as you want." Her sudden kindness struck me as odd. I couldn't help but question this abrupt change. Suspicions gnawed at me. It seemed my eldest child and his wife were orchestrating something, perhaps using food as a guise. They had a history of hostility and deceptive acts, so their newfound warmth raised red flags. It was clear to me that something wasn't right with this extravagant pizza. Their niceness felt contrived, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were up to something. I refused to be underestimated. Despite being a housewife in my 60s, living alone since my husband's passing, I was not without my own strength. When my husband died, my eldest child and their spouse had offered for me to move in with them. However, I declined, wanting them to cherish their newlywed bliss. Yet they insisted on living nearby out of concern for me, a gesture I initially appreciated. Their frequent visits, despite my reassurances that they needn't feel obligated, only fueled my suspicions. But it wasn't until one fateful night that my doubts were confirmed. They stayed over, claiming they had no plans for the next day. I suggested they return home since it was close by, but my daughter-in-law insisted they stay to deepen our relationship. Reluctantly, I agreed, offering them the guest room. In the dead of night, I caught them conversing in the living room. What I overheard shattered any remaining trust I had in them. They spoke callously about me, about their plans to secure my late husband's inheritance. They had squandered their own fortune on gambling debts, leaving them desperate for money. Their kindness towards me was a ruse, a means to an end. From that moment on, I kept my guard up. When my daughter-in-law extended hollow offers of help, I politely declined, wary of their true intentions. Their subsequent attempt to confront me about a supposed new love interest only reinforced my skepticism. Their concern was a thinly veiled attempt to maintain control over my finances, and I refused to be manipulated any longer. I could see right through her facade. It was clear she was only concerned about protecting her inheritance. Yet my daughter-in-law continued to play the role of the caring daughter-in-law, never revealing her true intentions. That's acceptable for now, I thought. The true nature of my eldest child and their spouse will be revealed in due time. I'll witness their true selves when the moment is right. And that moment arrived sooner than anticipated. "Happy birthday, Mom," exclaimed my eldest child, presenting me with a bag from a fancy pizza establishment. Inside were an array of pizzas, including my beloved crab meat pizza. "Thank you, but let me handle these," I insisted, prepared to start plating them. "No, Mom, today's your day. Sit back and relax. I'll take care of it," declared my daughter-in-law as she whisked the bag away to the kitchen. My eldest child followed suit, offering assistance. Despite their seemingly genuine efforts to celebrate my birthday, I remained wary. Something was amiss. As I contemplated their motives, they returned with plates in hand. Before me sat a steaming slice of crab meat pizza. "Here's your favorite, Mom. Enjoy," my eldest child affirmed, echoing their spouse's sentiments. To an outsider, it might have seemed like a joyous birthday celebration, but I knew better. There had to be something sinister lurking on that plate. I refused to be fooled. Their excessive kindness raised suspicions that couldn't be ignored. With my husband no longer by my side, I understood the importance of protecting myself. I vowed never to place my trust in them again. They would soon rue the day they attempted to deceive me. "Well, it certainly appears appetizing, but my tastes have evolved recently. I find myself drawn to the foie gras on your plate," I remarked, reaching for my eldest child's dish. They tried to intervene, but I feigned ignorance, questioning, "Is there a problem? You know, I've developed a newfound appreciation for foie gras. And if memory serves, you used to enjoy crab meat too, didn't you?" I suggested we share both dishes, observing the sudden pallor that washed over my eldest child's face. It was evident that they had schemed to manipulate me by tampering with my favorite pizza. Their reluctance to indulge confirmed my suspicions. "But it looks so tantalizing. Won't you have a taste?" I prodded, watching as their facade crumbled under the weight of their deceit. With resolve, I reached for a slice of the crab meat pizza and offered it to my eldest child. Reluctantly, they took a bite, their expression tense as if anticipating the aftermath. Daughter-in-law glanced at them, her concern evident in the pallor of their face. "You seem a bit off color. Perhaps the pizza didn't agree with you, Mom," she suggested, her voice tinged with apprehension. "Considering how your husband is feeling, maybe it's best to call it a night and prepare something different," she added, her panic palpable. Sensing daughter-in-law's desperation to end the meal, I countered, "But your son doesn't appear well either. It's safer for you to stay the night." Despite her attempts to deflect, insisting they leave, her words faltered, betraying her desire to depart. It was clear she was eager to make a swift exit. I always thought that for a couple attempting to deceive others, they're remarkably inept liars. They unravel at the slightest hint of unpredictability. I mused to myself as I observed my eldest child. Suddenly, something peculiar occurred. After a few moments, with a resounding thud, they collapsed to the ground. As I approached, I realized they were deeply asleep, likely drugged with a sleeping pill. Oh, couldn't keep your eyes open, could you? Must have been exhausted, I remarked, tilting my head in feigned innocence. Daughter-in-law's frustration boiled over. Enough. Why won't things go according to plan? Today was supposed to be crucial, she exclaimed, slapping my eldest child's cheek in a futile attempt to rouse them. But they remained unconscious, oblivious to her distress. I stood in stunned silence as daughter-in-law's facade crumbled before my eyes. Disregarding my presence, she began to confess. I'd been pretending to be the dutiful daughter-in-law, all in hopes of securing the inheritance to clear our debts. Today was meant to be the final step. We planned to incapacitate you and steal your banking card. But nothing went as planned. It's your fault, she accused, her glare piercing. Their scheme to drug me and steal my banking card under the guise of a birthday celebration was truly deplorable. I couldn't stoop to their level, so I decided to confront them head-on. I've known all along that your kindness was just a front to get to my money. That's why I kept my distance and declined your offer of pizza, I revealed, watching as daughter-in-law's expression shifted from shock to disbelief. It was clear she had underestimated my awareness of their deceit. How foolish they must feel for thinking they could deceive me so easily. Sorry to burst your bubble, but I'm not as naive as you both seem to think, I continued, a hint of scorn in my voice. Your sudden displays of kindness always struck me as suspicious, and I even overheard your conversation about the inheritance when I stayed over, discussing your plans in the target's own home. That's just plain foolish. Don't label us as fools. We've been doing our best, daughter-in-law retorted defensively. If this is your best effort, then it's no wonder you're drowning in debt, I countered sharply, watching as daughter-in-law's expression shifted with discomfort at the mention of the word debt. And you know about the debt too. How much do you know? It was evident that daughter-in-law hadn't anticipated my knowledge of their financial woes. Her anxiety was palpable at the mention of their debt. I did some digging and discovered the extent of your gambling debts. It was quite a shock to find out. You've managed to accumulate quite a substantial debt, I stated matter-of-factly, noting the growing pallor of daughter-in-law's face. She must have realized there was no escaping the truth. Mom, I'm truly sorry. Please forgive us. We're struggling to make ends meet. Can you lend us some money? We'll repay you, daughter-in-law pleaded earnestly, her once confident demeanor now replaced with desperation. Even in her distress, she continued to seek financial assistance. It was disheartening to realize that, to her, I was merely seen as a convenient source of support. I'm sorry, but I won't be giving you a single cent. I can't trust individuals like you to fulfill your promises, I responded firmly, refusing to yield to her pleas. You need to take responsibility for your actions. Daughter-in-law's demeanor shifted to one of resignation at my words. Though visibly disheartened, she seemed to comprehend my unwavering stance and refrained from asking for money again. Following that confrontation, my interactions with my eldest son and daughter-in-law gradually waned. They ceased visiting, barely maintaining any communication. Surprisingly, when those days arrived, I didn't experience loneliness as I had expected. Instead, I felt a sense of liberation, free from the shackles of deceit. Eventually, my eldest child and daughter-in-law relocated. According to neighbors, they were escorted away by dubious individuals, likely unable to settle their debts and forced to flee to a distant state. Perhaps they now endure harrowing circumstances, plagued by the consequences of their actions. Yet such matters are no longer my concern. We are estranged, our ties severed. I bid farewell to this tumultuous chapter, confiding in my late husband's photograph. His expression seemed to exude a sense of relief, as if acknowledging the closure of a fraught period. My sole family now resides in the memory of my late husband, the one who steadfastly stood by me. Though life is fleeting, I am determined to embrace it with strength, cherishing the cherished moments shared with my husband.
My name is Claire. At 29, I'm a chef at one of the city's most upscale restaurants. Cooking is my passion, my art. But let me tell you, my life isn't just about perfecting recipes. It's also about dealing with a recipe for disaster, namely, my mother-in-law, Margaret. I met Alex, my husband, in a way most people do these days, online. We clicked instantly. He was charming, with a smile that could light up the darkest room. We married within a year, a small ceremony but filled with love. That's when Margaret entered the picture, and let's just say, she wasn't the typical doting mom. It was a crisp autumn evening when I first met her. Alex had arranged a dinner at our place. I remember being nervous, wanting to impress her. "Mom, this is Claire. She's an amazing chef," Alex had introduced me with pride in his voice. Margaret, a tall woman with sharp features, had looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my apron like it was a piece of alien clothing. "A chef, huh? I hope you can cook something more refined than diner food." I had chuckled, nervously. "I'll do my best to impress you." Dinner was my arena, and I had put my heart into it. The table was set with my best dishes, herb-crusted lamb, a delicate risotto, and a chocolate mousse to die for. Margaret had poked at her food, a frown forming as she tasted each dish. "Well, it's edible, I suppose. Not what we're used to, but it'll do." Alex had shot me an apologetic look, but said nothing. That was Alex, always avoiding confrontation, especially with his mother. After dinner, as I was clearing the table, Margaret cornered me in the kitchen. "Claire, dear, I hope you understand that Alex comes from a refined family. We have certain standards." I had nodded, trying to keep my cool. "I understand, Mrs. Thompson. I'll keep that in mind." She had sniffed, her gaze cold and calculating. "See that you do. My son deserves the best." That night, as Alex and I lay in bed, I turned to him. "Your mother is quite something." He had sighed, pulling me close. "She's always been like that. But don't worry, we'll manage." Manage, I thought. If only I had known then how much of an understatement that would be. It was a busy Friday night at the restaurant. The kind of night where the kitchen is a whirlwind of activity, and I'm in my element, orchestrating the chaos. That's when Margaret decided to grace us with her presence, unannounced. I was plating a delicate salmon dish when I saw her sweeping through the dining area, like she owned the place. She had that look on her face, the kind that spelled trouble. My heart sank. I watched from the kitchen as she settled at a prime table, snapping her fingers for service. I wiped my hands on my apron, bracing myself for the inevitable. Emerging from the kitchen, I approached her table with a cautious smile. "Good evening, Mrs. Thompson." "What a surprise! What can I get for you tonight?" She looked up at me, her eyes sharp. "Oh, Claire, darling. I thought I'd try your little restaurant. Bring me your best dishes. Spare no expense." I nodded, my mind racing. "Of course, Mrs. Thompson." The orders were extravagant: caviar, truffle pasta, the most expensive wine. As I prepared her dishes, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. When the bill arrived at her table, Margaret glanced at it, then waved it away. "Oh, I won't be needing this. Put it on Claire's tab. She's family, after all." My head chef, who had delivered the bill, came back to me with a puzzled look. "Claire, she says you're covering her bill." I felt a knot in my stomach. "Did she now?" I muttered, clenching my fists. I walked back to her table, the bill in hand. "Mrs. Thompson, there seems to be a misunderstanding. This is a business, and..." Margaret cut me off with a wave of her hand. "Nonsense, Claire. You can afford a little generosity for your family. It's the least you can do." I tried to keep my voice steady. "Mrs. Thompson, this is highly irregular. But she was already standing, her coat draped over her arm. "Don't make a scene, dear. It's unbecoming. Just take care of it." And with that, she left, leaving me with a bill that could pay my rent twice over. How could she? How could she just walk in and expect me to foot the bill for her extravagance? I felt used, cornered. And worst of all, I felt alone in this. Alex would just tell me to let it go, to keep the peace. But peace, I realized, came at a price. A price I was no longer sure I was willing to pay. Holidays. A time for family, laughter, and good food. Well, in my world, it meant one thing: cooking up a storm for Margaret's never-ending guest list and dealing with her endless demands. It was Thanksgiving, and as usual, Margaret had decided to host it at our place. "After all, Claire, you have the space, and you're such a good cook," she had said on the phone, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. The day before Thanksgiving, I was in the kitchen, buried under a mountain of groceries that I had paid for, of course. The menu was a laundry list of Margaret's favorites, no regard for what I or anyone else liked. As I was peeling potatoes, Alex walked in, looking sheepish. "Babe," Mom called. "She wants to add a few more dishes." Some relatives just RSVP'd. I looked at him, my hands covered in potato skins. "More dishes? Alex, I'm already swamped here." He shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "I know, but you know how she is. It's just a few more people." "Just a few more people," I muttered. It was always just a few more people. The day of Thanksgiving was a blur. I cooked and cooked, the kitchen a battleground. When the guests started arriving, I was still in my apron, a whirlwind of pots and pans. Margaret swept into the kitchen, her nose in the air. "Claire, dear, do make sure everything is perfect. We have some very important guests." I forced a smile. "Everything's under control, Mrs. Thompson." The dinner was a hit, or so it seemed. I barely had time to sit down, let alone eat. Margaret played the gracious host, basking in the compliments, as if she had slaved over the stove all day. After the guests had left, I was clearing up, my back aching, my feet sore. That's when Margaret decided to give her feedback. "Claire, the turkey was a tad dry, and the cranberry sauce too tart. And really, dear, you could have dressed up a bit. You looked like a maid amongst the guests." I clenched my jaw, holding back the retort that was on the tip of my tongue. "I'll keep that in mind for next time, Mrs. Thompson." Alex, who had been silent all evening, finally spoke up. "Mom, Claire worked hard. It was a great dinner." Margaret sniffed. "Hard work is expected, Alexander. No need for praise. Good night." As I watched her leave, I wondered why I was putting up with this. Why I was allowing myself to be treated like a doormat, my efforts dismissed, my feelings ignored. Alex put an arm around me. "Don't take it to heart, babe. Let's just go to bed." I nodded, too tired to argue. But inside, a storm was brewing. Something had to change, and soon. I never thought I'd be grateful for getting sick, but when I caught the flu right before Christmas, it felt like a twisted sort of blessing. Maybe now I'd get a break from Margaret's demands. Or so I thought. I was curled up on the couch, buried under blankets, a mountain of used tissues beside me. That's when my phone rang. It was Margaret, of course. "Claire, dear, you do remember Christmas is at our place this year. You'll be cooking, won't you?" Her voice was as cold as the winter outside. I croaked into the phone, "Margaret, I'm really sick. I don't think I can." She cut me off, her tone icy. "Sick? Convenient timing, I must say. We're counting on you, Claire. Don't be selfish." Selfish? I couldn't believe my ears. "Margaret, I can barely stand up. I'm contagious." There was a pause, then a huff. "Fine. We'll manage somehow. Don't expect us to be sympathetic." The call ended, and I was left staring at the phone, a mix of anger and disbelief churning inside me. Later that day, Alex came home, his face tense. "Mom called me. She's really upset, Claire. She thinks you're faking it." "Faking it?" I sat up, the room spinning a bit. "Alex, look at me. Do I look like I'm faking?" He sat beside me, his expression softening. "No, you look terrible. But you know how Mom is. She's stressed about Christmas. Stressed? What about me? Sick, exhausted, and now accused of lying. Alex, I need you to understand. I'm really sick. I can't cook for Christmas. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know. I'll talk to her. Just rest, okay? Rest. Right. As if I could rest with Margaret's words echoing in my head. The next few days were a blur of fever, chills, and restless sleep. Miraculously, I started feeling a bit better just before Christmas. Not great, but no longer on death's door. I told Alex, hoping for some understanding. Instead, he said, "That's great, babe. So you can make it to Mom's for Christmas, right?" I stared at him, my heart sinking. Alex, I'm still weak. I can't cook for everyone. He looked disappointed, almost hurt. But it's Christmas, Claire. Mom's expecting us. Can't you just make a small effort? Small effort? I was fighting to get out of bed, and he wanted a Christmas feast. No, Alex. I can't. And I won't. My voice was firm, a hint of the frustration I'd been bottling up coming through. He didn't say anything, just nodded and walked away. As Christmas Eve approached, I was still reeling from the flu. There was no way I could cook an entire feast. I decided to take a stand. I won't be able to cook for Christmas, but I'll order dishes from the restaurant, I told Alex, my voice firm. He looked at me, puzzled. What? But Mom's expecting you to cook, like always. I shook my head. I can't, Alex. I'm still weak. She'll have to deal with it. He sighed, a look of resignation on his face. Okay, I'll tell her. Later, when Alex relayed the message to Margaret over the phone, I could hear her shrill voice from across the room. Order food? That's her solution? Fine, but she better not expect me to cook. Christmas Eve arrived, and the delivery man from my restaurant showed up with the food. Margaret was there to meet him, signing the delivery papers without so much as a glance. Little did she know what she was actually agreeing to. As we gathered for dinner, I could feel Margaret's eyes burning into me. Too lazy to cook, Claire? Taking the easy way out, I see. Her words stung, but I bit back a retort. Alex was silent, his eyes fixed on his plate. Throughout dinner, Margaret's comments flew fast and furious. Can't even cook a meal for her family. What kind of wife are you, Claire? I clenched my fists under the table, my patience wearing thin. Alex didn't say a word, his silence a heavy presence at the table. After dinner, as I helped clear the table, Margaret cornered me. You've outdone yourself with laziness this year, Claire. Can't even cook a simple Christmas dinner. I turned to her, my voice low but fierce. I was sick, Margaret. I did what I could. She scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. Sick? Looks more like laziness to me. You've just taken the easy way out. I stared at her, my anger boiling over. I'm not your personal chef, Margaret. I'm not here to bend over backward for you. Her eyes widened in shock, and used to being spoken back to. But I was past caring. Alex finally spoke up, his voice weak. Mom, Claire's right. She was sick. But Margaret brushed him off, her gaze still fixed on me. You've made your point, Claire. Don't expect any sympathy from me. As all the guests gathered in the living room, I stood up, the eyes of the guests curiously fixed on me. A sly smile played on my lips, a sense of retribution fueling my courage. Before everyone leaves, I have something to say, I announced, my voice steady, yet loud enough to cut through the post-dinner chatter. Margaret, sitting at the head of the table, raised an eyebrow. What now, Claire? Another one of your excuses? No, Mrs. Thompson. It's about the dinner tonight, I replied, my satisfaction growing. You owe $5,000 for it. A collective gasp filled the room. Margaret's face transitioned from smugness to shock. Excuse me? $5,000? For what? I held up the invoice, detailing every item. For everything, the groceries, chef's labor, delivery. All of it. Her voice escalated, piercing the shocked silence. This is absurd. I will not pay for your incompetence. But you already agreed to, Mrs. Thompson, when you signed for the delivery, I countered, feeling a surge of power. She sputtered in disbelief. I signed for the delivery, not for this outrageous bill. From my folder, I produced the signed delivery papers. Unfortunately, you did. It's all legally binding. Alex, my husband, who had been a silent spectator, finally interjected, his voice laced with unease. Claire, isn't this a bit much? Margaret turned to him, her eyes alight with vindication. See, even your husband knows you're being unreasonable. I faced Alex, my resolve unwavering. It's not unreasonable, Alex. Your mother needs to understand the cost of her demands. Margaret stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I will not be swindled by you. One of the guests, an elderly aunt, spoke up tentatively. Margaret, dear, if you signed it, it does seem fair to honor it. Margaret shot her a withering look. Fair? This is daylight robbery. Alex tried to calm the waters. Mom, let's discuss this rationally. Maybe there's a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Margaret shrieked. Claire is exploiting us. I interjected, my patience fraying. Exploiting? I'm asking to be paid for professional services, Mrs. Thompson. The room had fallen into an uncomfortable silence, the tension almost tangible. Margaret's gaze was venomous. This is a declaration of war, Claire. You will pay for this. I met her gaze, my voice steady. I'm standing up for myself, Mrs. Thompson. That's all. As she stormed out of the room, the guests exchanged uneasy glances, whispering among themselves. Alex approached me, his expression a mix of frustration and disbelief. Claire, why did you have to do this? In front of everyone. I looked at him, a sense of finality settling in my heart. Because, Alex, it was time. Time to show that I won't be pushed around anymore. Not even by your mother. The guests began to disperse, the mood somber, the festive spirit lost. I knew this was a turning point, a moment that would define the future of my relationship with Margaret and maybe even with Alex. The morning after the Christmas debacle was a battleground in our kitchen. The air was thick with resentment and unsaid words. Alex had obviously talked to his mother before, broke the silence with a voice sharpened by anger. You humiliated my mother, Claire. In front of everyone. How could you? I slammed my coffee cup down, my patience frayed to its limits. Humiliated her? Alex, she's been walking all over me for years. When will you see that? He glared at me, his words cutting through the air. She's my mother, Claire. She was just being herself. You didn't have to go and make a scene. I stood up, my own anger rising. Being herself? You mean being overbearing, insulting, and downright disrespectful? And you never did a thing to stop her. He scoffed, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Oh, so now I'm the bad guy? She's always right, Claire. You just don't understand her. I stared at him in disbelief. Always right? Even when she treats me like dirt? Is that what you really think, Alex? He didn't back down. Yes, I do. She's my mother. She comes first. That was the last straw. I felt something inside me snap. First? What about your wife, Alex? Where do I come in your life? He didn't answer, just gave me a cold, hard look. I took a deep breath, my decision clear in my mind. You know what, Alex? I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I'm filing for divorce. His face went from anger to shock. Divorce? You're going to throw away our marriage over this? I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. No, Alex. I'm saving myself. From your mother, and from a husband who won't stand up for his wife. He looked like he wanted to say something, but no words came out. Instead, he just stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me standing there, a mix of anger, relief, and sadness swirling inside me. The rest of the day passed in a tense silence. The chasm between us had grown too wide to bridge. I knew I had made the right decision, but it didn't make it any less painful. Months had passed since I filed for divorce. The world I once knew had crumbled, but from its ashes, I was building something new, something that was mine. I found myself in the kitchen of my apartment, the morning sun casting a warm glow on the walls. The aroma of fresh coffee filled the air, a comforting presence in my newfound solitude. My phone rang, breaking the peaceful silence. It was my best friend, Lisa. Hey, Claire. How are you holding up? Her voice was filled with concern. I took a sip of my coffee, a smile touching my lips. I'm good, Lisa. Really, I am. I feel free. She chuckled. That's great to hear. You sound better. I leaned against the counter. I am better. I'm focusing on myself now, my career. I'm rediscovering who I am, without Alex, without Margaret. There was a pause, and then she said, I'm proud of you, Claire. You're doing what's best for you. I sighed, a sense of contentment washing over me. Yeah, it's been tough, but I feel stronger, you know? I'm finally standing up for myself. Lisa's voice brightened. Speaking of standing up for yourself, how's the restaurant doing? I glanced out the window, a sense of determination building within me. It's going great. I've been creating new dishes, experimenting. I feel alive in the kitchen again. That's the Claire I know, Lisa said, her voice warm with affection. Hey, why don't you come over tonight? Cook us one of your amazing dishes, and we can catch up. I laughed, the sound light and genuine. I'd love that, Lisa. It'll be nice to cook for friends again. After hanging up, I looked around my kitchen, a space that was once a battlefield of marital disputes and now a sanctuary of my independence. I picked up a photo from the counter, one of me and Alex in happier times. For a moment, I allowed myself to remember the good times, the love that once was. Then, with a deep breath, I put the photo away in a drawer. It was part of my past, a chapter that had closed. As I prepared for the day, I felt a sense of excitement for what lay ahead. The divorce had been a difficult journey, but it was also a journey of self-discovery and empowerment. That evening, as I cooked in Lisa's kitchen, laughter and chatter filling the room, I realized this was what happiness felt like. No pretense, no pressure, just me being me. As we sat down to eat, Lisa raised her glass. To new beginnings, Claire. I raised mine, a smile spreading across my face. To new beginnings. I'm Mila, a 36-year-old woman living what I thought was a fairly ordinary life. I married my college sweetheart, Jack, a man who was once my rock. We didn't have kids, just the two of us and our dreams, living in a house that was finally ours, mortgage-free. This house was a symbol of our years together, bought on a mortgage that we aggressively paid down, especially after I used the inheritance from my dad to make the final payments. Our life was simple but content, or so I believed. Jack, tall and usually unflappable with his finance job, was my partner in everything. We had our share of arguments, like any couple, but I always felt we were a team. His parents, George and Martha, had become like my own. George, a burly, kind-hearted man with a booming laugh, and Martha, a gentle soul who had taken me under her wing from day one. Our relationship was one of mutual respect and affection. Tonight was supposed to be a small celebration, just George and us, marking the end of our mortgage payments. The house was warmly lit, and I had spent the day cooking George's favorite dishes. I remember glancing at the clock, noting Jack's unusual lateness. George arrived first, cheerful as always, but with an undercurrent of concern for his son's tardiness. We chatted in the kitchen, George regaling me with stories of his youth, his laughter filling the room. But as the night grew older, my anxiety crept in. Finally, the doorbell rang, and I rushed to open it, expecting Jack, maybe with a story of traffic or a last-minute work emergency. What I saw instead felt like a scene from a movie. Jack stood there, not alone, but with a young, stylish woman clinging to his arm. She had an air of confidence, almost defiance, as she scanned our home, her eyes lingering on the pictures of our life together on the walls. "Jack, what's going on?" I managed to get out, my voice a mix of confusion and rising anger. Jack looked different. His usual calm demeanor was replaced with a cold, almost cruel smirk. "This is Lana," he said nonchalantly, his grip on her waist possessive. "She's going to be my wife." The words hit me like a freight train. Wife? Jack, are you joking? What about us? Our life together? George, who had come to see what the commotion was about, looked as shocked as I felt. "Jack, son, what are you saying? Mila is your wife." Lana finally spoke, her voice sharp and businesslike. "Looks like a nice place. We'll probably change a few things once it's ours." Jack's next words felt surreal. "Mila, I want a divorce. It's time you left." I was stunned, my mind racing. "Divorce? Jack, we built this life together, and you want to throw it away for her?" George's face was red with anger and disbelief. "Jack, think about what you're doing. This is madness." Jack shrugged, dismissive. "My mind's made up. Start packing, Mila. This house isn't yours anymore." I stood there, rooted to the spot, as George took my arm. "Mila, let's go. You don't need to take this." We left the house, my home, a place filled with memories now tainted by betrayal. I spent the night at George and Martha's, their kindness a small comfort in the storm of my suddenly shattered life. I woke up in George and Martha's guest room, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. The events of last night replayed in my mind, each detail a fresh jab of pain. I could hear George and Martha in the kitchen, their voices a low murmur. Dragging myself out of bed, I stumbled into the kitchen, where George was making coffee and Martha was setting the table. They both looked up as I entered, their faces a mix of concern and anger. "Morning, Mila," George said gruffly, handing me a cup of coffee. "Slept any?" "Not really," I replied, my voice hoarse. "Feels like a nightmare." Martha came over and gave me a hug. "That boy has lost his mind, Mila. You don't deserve this." I sipped the coffee, feeling its warmth but not much else. "I don't know what to do, Martha. My whole life just turned upside down." George slammed his cup on the table, his usual jovial demeanor gone. "We'll not let him get away with this, Mila. He can't just throw you out like yesterday's garbage." Martha nodded, her eyes fierce. "You've put too much into that house, into that marriage. It's not right." I felt a surge of anger, thinking about Jack and Lana in my house. I paid for most of that house. My inheritance, my savings. George's eyes lit up. "That's it. You have rights, Mila. That house is as much yours as it is his." Martha was quick to agree. "Yes, you need to fight for what's yours. Don't let that woman take everything from you." I started to feel a fire building inside me, fueled by their support. "You're right. I won't let Jack and his mistress walk all over me." George stood up, determination on his face. "We'll get a lawyer, someone who can sort this mess out. You won't be alone in this, Mila. Martha squeezed my hand. We're with you, every step of the way. That boy needs a lesson on how to treat people. Sitting there with them, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could get through this. But I knew it was going to be a long, hard fight. The morning at George and Martha's had stirred something in me, a sense of resolve I hadn't felt in a long time. I spent the day buried in financial records, piecing together every contribution I'd made towards our home. The dining table was littered with bank statements, mortgage documents, and old receipts, tangible proof of my investment in what was supposed to be our shared dream. George, sitting across from me, was meticulously going through each document. Look at this, Mila. You've paid more than half of the mortgage, and that's not even counting your inheritance. You have a strong claim to the house. I nodded, my fingers tracing the figures that represented years of my life. I'm going to call Jack. He needs to understand he can't just erase me from his life and take everything we built together. Martha, who had been brewing some coffee, set a cup in front of me. Be clear and stand your ground, Mila. He's used to walking all over you, but not this time. I dialed Jack's number. It rang twice before he picked up. Mila? What do you want? His voice was dismissive, cold. I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves. Jack, I've been looking over our finances. It turns out I've put more money into the house. My inheritance, my savings, it adds up to me owning 2/3 of the house. There was a brief silence on the line. You're joking, right? No, Jack. I'm dead serious. I've calculated it all. If you want to keep the house, you need to buy out my share. That's $266,000. I could almost hear his sneer through the phone. You think you can just demand money out of the blue? This isn't a demand, Jack. It's what I'm owed. It's fair. You can either pay me, or we sell the house and split the money. Your choice. Jack's voice was laced with annoyance. Fine, you'll get your money. But after this, we're done. I hung up, my heart racing. He agreed to pay, I said, half in shock. George was beaming with pride. You did good, Mila. Standing up to him like that. Martha came over and hugged me. I'm proud of you, Mila. You're taking control of your life again. That afternoon, as I sorted through more paperwork, George and Martha shared stories of their own struggles and triumphs, reminding me that resilience was a family trait. We discussed lawyers, next steps, and strategies, turning their kitchen into a war room of sorts. As evening fell, George cooked dinner, a simple stew that filled the house with a comforting aroma. We ate together, talking about everything but the situation at hand, giving me a much-needed break from the stress. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt like I wasn't facing it alone. With George and Martha's support, I had a fighting chance. And as I drifted off to sleep, I clung to that thought like a lifeline. The morning of the divorce proceedings, I walked into the lawyer's office with a steely resolve. The office was cold and sterile, the kind of place where futures were dismantled and rearranged. Jack entered, his face an emotionless mask. He wasn't alone. Lana, his mistress, was glued to his side. Her confidence seemed forced, a thin veneer over her uncertainty. I could feel their surprise as they saw me sitting there, calm and composed. Before Jack could even find his words, I cut to the chase. I'm pregnant, Jack. Jack's eyes widened, his composure slipping. What? Pregnant? Lana's face twisted from confidence to confusion and then to rage. You said you hadn't touched her in months. You lying jerk. I ignored her outburst and continued, I'm asking for alimony, Jack. $800 a month, for the next 21 years. For our child. The lawyer, Mr. Harris, a middle-aged man with a stern face, nodded in approval. Given the circumstances, Mrs. Smith's request is perfectly reasonable. Jack looked like he had been punched. This is insane. You can't just spring this on me and expect me to pay up. I met his gaze squarely. I can and I am. You made your bed, now lie in it. You owe this to our child, if not to me. Lana was fuming, her voice shrill with anger. Jack, you can't do this. She's clearly trying to trap you. Jack, flustered and overwhelmed, ran a hand through his hair. I need time to think. Mr. Harris interjected, Mr. Smith, the law is clear. You have a financial responsibility to your child. Jack slumped into the chair, defeated. Fine, he muttered. I'll pay the alimony. As they left, Lana was hissing into Jack's ear, her facade of poise completely shattered. I remained seated, feeling a mixture of triumph and sadness. This wasn't just about the money, it was about standing up for myself and my future child. In the following weeks, I worked with Mr. Harris to iron out the details. He was impressed with my resolve, often remarking on my newfound toughness. You're not the same woman who walked into my office a month ago, he said during one of our meetings. I smiled, feeling a sense of empowerment. I guess I'm not. I have someone else to think about now. As I left his office after signing the final papers, I felt a sense of closure. The battle was tough, but I had come out stronger. I was ready to face whatever came next, not just for me, but for my child as well. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a say in it. After the tumultuous divorce proceedings, I found an unexpected source of strength in Jack's parents, George and Martha. We sat in their cozy living room, a stark contrast to the cold lawyer's office, plotting our next move. George, always a man of action, was pacing the room. We need to show that scoundrel he can't just trample over our family, he said, his voice tinged with anger. Martha, ever the strategist, added, we've got to be smart about this. We can't just barge in there and make a scene. I nodded, feeling a mix of gratitude and determination. I agree. But what can we do? He's made his bed with Lana. George stopped pacing and turned to me. What if we visit them? Regularly. Make our presence felt. Remind Jack of the family he's turning his back on. Martha's eyes lit up. Yes, and it'll drive that little homewrecker up the wall. She won't like us being around, reminding her of what she's done. I couldn't help but smile at their cunning plan. You think it'll work? Make her uncomfortable? George grinned. Oh, I'm sure it will. We'll be the most annoying, ever-present in-laws. She won't know what hit her. Martha clapped her hands together. We'll start tomorrow. A nice, long, unannounced visit. The next day, we executed our plan. George rang the doorbell of what used to be my home, a big smile plastered on his face as Jack opened the door. Son. We thought we'd drop by. Spend some quality time together, George boomed, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Lana appeared behind Jack, her smile forced. Oh, what a surprise. And what is she doing here? Martha breezed past her, adding, she's with us. We just couldn't stay away. It's been too long. We spent hours there, talking loudly, laughing, and reminiscing about old times, pointedly ignoring Lana's growing discomfort. Every time she tried to interject or change the subject, George or Martha skillfully steered the conversation back. As we left, Lana's frustration was evident. She was fuming, barely managing a fake smile. In the car, Martha chuckled. Did you see her face? She was about to explode. George was laughing too. We're just getting started. That girl has no idea what she's in for. I sat in the back seat, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. It was a small, petty victory, but after everything that had happened, it felt good to take some control back, to push back against the injustice of it all. With George and Martha by my side, I felt stronger, ready to face whatever came next. A few weeks after our in-law intervention strategy began, I received unexpected news from Martha during one of our coffee chats. "Mila, you won't believe it. Jack's put the house up for sale," she said, her voice a mix of shock and satisfaction. I almost choked on my coffee. "What? Why would he do that?" Martha shrugged. "Seems like Lana can't stand us being around. She's pushing him to move." I pondered the situation, an idea slowly forming in my mind. "Martha, what if I bought the house back?" George, who had been quietly reading the newspaper, looked up. "Buy it back? You think that's a good idea?" I nodded. "Yes, but at a lower price. Jack's desperate, and I have the money from the settlement. It's perfect." Martha smiled slyly. That would be quite the turn of events. Imagine Lana's face if she knew. I contacted a realtor friend, explaining the situation and my plan. She agreed to help, ensuring my identity remained hidden during the negotiations. A week later, I sat with my realtor friend, discussing our strategy. Jack's asking for a high price, but we know he's desperate. "Let's lowball him." My realtor nodded. "I'll start the negotiations. He won't know it's you until the deal is sealed." The negotiations went back and forth for days. Finally, Jack caved, accepting a much lower offer than his initial asking price. My realtor friend called me with the news. "We got it, Mila." "He accepted the offer," she said, barely containing her excitement. I couldn't help but laugh. "I can't believe it. I'm buying my house back." The day we closed the deal, I met my realtor at the office. "You're now the proud owner of your old house," she said, handing me the keys. The day I reclaimed my house was a day of triumph. I stood outside the familiar front door, the weight of the keys in my hands symbolizing so much more than mere ownership. My heart pounded with a mix of excitement and apprehension as I prepared to face Jack and Lana one last time in what was once our shared home. Unlocking the door, I stepped inside. The sight of Jack and Lana, surrounded by boxes in the midst of packing, brought a sense of surreal finality. They both looked up, shock and disbelief etched on their faces. "What the hell, Mila? How did you get in here?" Jack's voice was a mixture of anger and confusion. I couldn't help but smirk. "Oh, didn't you hear? I'm the new owner." "Surprise!" Lana's face turned a shade of red, her eyes wide in shock. "You? This has to be some kind of sick joke." Crossing my arms, I leaned against the door frame. "No joke, Lana. I bought the house. It's mine now, and you two are trespassing." Jack's face contorted with anger. "This is low, even for you, Mila. You think you can just waltz back in here and take over?" I straightened up, my voice firm and unwavering. "Yes, Jack, that's exactly what I'm doing. You wanted me out, and now I'm back. My house, my rules. Time for you to leave." Lana, fuming, spat out, "You can't do this. We have rights." I walked into the living room, standing my ground. "The only right you have right now is to walk out of my house. I suggest you do it quickly." Jack, realizing the futility of arguing, began to gather his belongings. Lana followed suit, her movements jerky with frustration. As they left, Lana hissed at me, "You haven't won anything, Mila." Watching them leave, I felt a surge of empowerment. This house, which had witnessed the rise and fall of my marriage, was now a symbol of my resilience. It was a battleground where I had emerged victorious. After the door closed behind them, I walked through the empty rooms. Each space echoed with memories, both good and bad, but now it was time to make new ones. I envisioned the house filled with laughter and love once more, a sanctuary for me and my future child. Sitting down in the quiet living room, I allowed myself a moment to take it all in. I had come full circle, but this time, I was in control, a victor reclaiming her kingdom. The journey had been fraught with pain and betrayal, but it had led me to this moment of triumph. My house, my rules, my life. I was ready to start anew, stronger and more determined than ever. One afternoon, as I was arranging the nursery for my soon-to-arrive baby, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find George and Martha, beaming with smiles. "Mila, dear, how are you holding up?" Martha asked as she stepped inside, her eyes taking in the changes I'd made. "I'm doing well, Martha." "Getting ready for the baby," I replied, leading them into the living room. George, carrying a bag of baby clothes, chuckled. "This little one is going to be spoiled rotten by us, you know that, right?" I laughed, the sound bright and genuine. I wouldn't have it any other way. As we sat, chatting and laughing, another knock came at the door. This time, it was Jack. He looked different, worn out, a little defeated. "Can we talk, Mila?" Jack's voice was low, lacking its usual confidence. I hesitated but nodded, stepping outside to talk to him privately. I messed up, Mila," Jack started, not meeting my eyes. "Lana left me. I'm broke, and I was hoping." I cut him off, my voice steady. "Hoping for what, Jack? For me to take you back? After everything?" Jack's face crumpled. "I know I don't deserve it, but I have nowhere else to go." I looked at him, the man I once loved, now just a stranger filled with regrets. "Jack, I've moved on. I'm starting a new life, for me and my baby. You need to do the same." He nodded slowly, the reality of the situation sinking in. "I understand. I'm sorry, Mila." As he walked away, I felt a closure I didn't know I needed. Turning back to the house, I saw George and Martha watching through the window, their expressions a mix of concern and support. "He won't bother you again, will he?" George asked as I walked back in. I shook my head. "No, he won't. I made it clear." Martha hugged me. "You're so strong, Mila. We're so proud of you." Sitting back down, surrounded by the people who had become my true family, I felt a sense of peace. The journey had been long and fraught with pain, but it had led me here, to a place of strength and new beginnings. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape, and I looked forward to every moment of it. Hi, everyone. I'm Jane, your everyday 27-year-old who got more than she bargained for. I was just another number cruncher until my life took a sharp turn a few years back. This is my story, no frills, just the raw deal. It all started when I switched jobs and joined this new firm as an accountant. That's where Mark came into the picture. He was the sales guy, confident, charming, and with a smile that could sell ice to Eskimos. We first bumped into each other in the break room, and our chat started over the world's most temperamental coffee machine. "Hey, you're the new accountant, right?" Mark leaned casually against the doorframe, a smirk playing on his lips. "Guilty as charged." "I'm Jane. And you are?" I responded, trying to look unimpressed, but internally, I was already intrigued. "I'm Mark, head of sales. And unofficially, the resident coffee machine whisperer," he said with a wink. We both laughed, and from that day, things just clicked between us. Fast forward 2 years, and Mark planned the most romantic proposal you could imagine. A weekend trip to the beach, a sunset dinner, and him getting down on one knee. I mean, it was like something out of a movie. I said yes, without a second thought. Our wedding was something else, beautiful, heartfelt, but it flew by in a blur. We started our married life in the house I inherited from my grandpa. It's a quaint, old place with a lot of character, and I've always loved it. A few weeks after settling in, Mark brought up a life-changing idea. "Babe, have you ever thought about taking a break from work? You know, being a housewife for a while?" Mark suggested one evening, his eyes full of hope. I remember feeling a jolt of surprise. "A housewife? But Mark, I've always been passionate about my career," I replied, trying to keep the confusion out of my voice. "I get that, Jane. But I've been doing really well at work. We can afford it, and think about it, no more stress, just focusing on us, maybe even starting a family soon, he said, reaching for my hand. His words, his tone, it was all so convincing. I couldn't help but get swayed by his enthusiasm. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. Why not shake things up a bit, right? The first few weeks were a novelty. I had time to do things I'd never had time for: gardening, reading, trying out new recipes. Mark would come home to a clean house and dinner on the table. We'd spend our evenings talking about our future, making plans, laughing. It was like a prolonged honeymoon phase. But as time passed, I started feeling a bit restless. I missed the challenges of my job, the satisfaction of solving complex problems. I even missed the annoying buzz of my office phone. Still, I pushed those feelings aside, telling myself that this was just an adjustment period. Then, things started changing subtly. Mark's compliments about how nice the house looked or how good dinner tasted became expectations. If dinner was late or the house a bit untidy, he'd make these offhand comments that stung more than I wanted to admit. I started feeling less like a partner and more like a live-in maid. I remember calling my best friend, Laura, to vent. I just feel like I'm losing a bit of myself, you know? I confided in her. Losing yourself? Jane, you're a firecracker. Don't let this housewife gig douse your spark, Laura said, her voice a mixture of concern and encouragement. She had a point. I had always prided myself on being independent, on making my own way. And here I was, feeling lost in a role I never thought I'd play. After settling into this housewife role, I thought I had things figured out. But, boy, was I wrong. One evening, Mark dropped a surprise that turned everything upside down. Mark came home looking all serious, which was unusual for him. Jane, we need to talk, he started, not even taking off his coat. What's up? You look like you've seen a ghost, I joked, trying to lighten the mood. It's my folks. Their apartment is getting renovated and they need a place to crash. Just for a couple of weeks, Mark said, avoiding my eyes. I was taken aback. A couple of weeks? Here. Yeah, I mean, it's just for a short while. It won't be that bad, he said, finally looking at me. I sighed, feeling a mix of reluctance and duty. Okay, for a couple of weeks. But they need to respect our space, Mark. He nodded, of course, they will. Thanks, babe. You're the best. Fast forward a few days, and Mark's parents, Bob and Linda, arrived. And let me tell you, it was like a circus unloading. Bags, boxes, even furniture, they brought everything but the kitchen sink. Jane, dear, make room. We've got a lot of stuff, Linda said, pushing past me with a box that looked like it contained her entire life. Bob followed, lugging a monstrous armchair. Hope you don't mind us bringing some comforts from home, he grunted as he squeezed it through the door. Our cozy home turned into a storage unit overnight. Everywhere I looked, there were their things. It was overwhelming, to say the least. But that was just the start. Bob and Linda didn't waste time making themselves at home. Bob took over the TV, flipping channels like he owned the place. Linda started rearranging my kitchen. My kitchen? Linda, what are you doing? I asked, trying to keep my cool. Oh, just organizing things a bit better, dear. You know how it is, she said without even looking at me. I bit my tongue, reminding myself it was only for a short time. But inside, I was fuming. This was my home, and they were treating it like their vacation house. Then came the dinner fiasco. I made a healthy salad and grilled chicken, my usual fare. But Linda looked at her plate like I'd served her grass. What's this? Rabbit food? Linda scoffed, pushing the plate away. Mom, come on, Jane worked hard on this, Mark tried to intervene. It's fine, Mark. I can make something else, I said, even though it was far from fine. No, let's order pizza. I need some real food, Bob chimed in, already picking up his phone. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being an outsider in my own home. Mark snored beside me, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I was hosting, cooking, cleaning, and for what? To be treated like an unpaid maid in my own house. My in-laws, Bob and Linda, had turned my house into their own personal playground. But things went from bad to worse real quick. Linda started taking over the kitchen like she was running a military operation. One morning, as I was making my usual avocado toast, she marched in and made a face. "What are you eating?" "Bird food," she snorted, rummaging through the fridge. "It's avocado toast, Linda. It's healthy," I replied, trying to keep my cool. "Healthy, schmelthy. You need some real food, girl. Here, let me make you some eggs and bacon," she said, pushing me aside. I stood there, fuming, as she took over my breakfast. It was clear she didn't respect my choices or my space. Then there was Bob. He had turned our living room into his personal lounge. One evening, I wanted to watch my favorite show, but Bob was sprawled on the couch, watching some loud action movie. "Bob, do you mind if I watch my show?" "It's the season finale tonight," I asked, holding the remote hesitantly. "No can do, Jane. I'm watching this." "Find something else to do," he said without even glancing my way. I couldn't believe it. In my own living room. I stormed off, feeling like a stranger in my house. But the real kicker came a few days later. I found Linda rearranging my closet. "My closet? What the heck, Linda? That's my personal stuff," I yelled, losing my temper for the first time. "Oh, relax, Jane. I'm just making some space for our things." "You've got too much junk here anyway," she said, tossing my clothes aside. That's when Mark walked in. "What's all the yelling about?" he asked, looking from me to his mom. "Your mother is going through my things." "That's what's wrong," I snapped. "Mom, maybe you should ask Jane before moving her stuff," Mark said, but his tone was half-hearted. Fine. I was just trying to help," Linda huffed, leaving the room in a mock huff. Mark turned to me. "Jane, can't you just let it go? They're just trying to fit in." "Just trying to fit in? They're taking over, Mark. This is our home, not theirs," I said, my voice rising. Mark sighed. "Just bear with it a bit longer, okay?" I felt so alone in that moment. My home didn't feel like mine anymore, and it seemed like Mark was more on their side than mine. So, the situation in my house was already pretty tense, but what happened next really pushed me over the edge. One day, I noticed my bank card was missing. Panic mode kicked in. I tore the house apart looking for it, only to find it in the most unexpected place, Linda's purse. I confronted her immediately. "Linda, why do you have my bank card?" She just shrugged. "Oh, I needed to pick up a few things and didn't have cash on me. I didn't think it would be a big deal." "A big deal? You took my card without asking." "That's stealing." I was fuming. Before I could say another word, Mark walked in. "What's all this shouting about?" he asked, looking from me to his mother. "Your mom took my bank card and used it without my permission," I explained, holding up the card. He turned to Linda. "Mom, you should have asked first." Linda rolled her eyes. "I just needed a few groceries. It's not like I bought a diamond necklace." I couldn't believe my ears. "It's my money, Linda. You can't just take my things." That's when Mark dropped a bombshell. "Jane, let's not blow this out of proportion. You live off my money anyway, so what's the big deal if my mom uses it?" I was speechless. His words hit me like a slap in the face. "Your money? I can't believe you're saying this." "It's our money, Mark, in our marriage." He just shrugged. "Whatever. It's not a big deal. She'll pay you back." I felt like I was in some bad dream. My husband was taking his mother's side over something so blatantly wrong. A couple of weeks passed, and the tension in the house was unbearable. I decided it was time to ask the big question. So, when are you two planning to move back to your apartment? I asked Bob and Linda one evening at dinner. They just laughed. Move back? Why would we do that? Linda said, exchanging a look with Mark. Yeah, we've decided to stay here. It's much nicer, and Mark doesn't want to waste money on rent for us, Bob added. I turned to Mark, looking for some sort of explanation. He avoided my eyes. Yeah, Jane. It doesn't make sense to rent a place for them when we have space here. I sat there, stunned. My home, my sanctuary, was being overtaken. My husband, whom I thought was my partner, was now telling me his parents were here to stay. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, they did. One day, I decided to go for a jog, just to clear my head. But luck wasn't on my side. I tripped and fell, and the pain was instant. I knew I'd broken my leg. Hobbling back home was a nightmare. When I got back, I found Mark and his parents in the living room. Mark, I think I broke my leg. I need to go to the hospital, I said, trying to keep the pain out of my voice. Mark looked up, annoyed. What now, Jane? Can't you see we're busy here? Linda chimed in, oh, stop being dramatic. It's probably just a sprain. No, it really hurts. I need help, I insisted, feeling the room spin from the pain. Bob just scoffed. At your age, you shouldn't be running around like a teenager. Serve you right. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'm in pain here. Can't any of you see that? Mark finally got up, his expression more of inconvenience than concern. Fine, I'll take you. But this better not be some ploy to get out of housework. At the hospital, it was confirmed, a broken leg. The next few weeks were hell. I was stuck at home, on crutches, unable to do much. You'd think my husband and his parents would help, right? Wrong. They acted as if nothing had changed. I was still expected to cook and clean. One day, I was trying to make lunch, balancing on my crutches. Linda walked in and saw me struggling. Can't you do that any faster? We're hungry, she said, not offering to help. I'm doing the best I can on one leg. I snapped, my frustration boiling over. Well, it's not good enough. You're being incredibly lazy, Linda retorted. That's when Mark walked in. What's going on here? He asked, looking from me to his mother. Your wife is taking forever to make lunch. It's like she's using her injury as an excuse, Linda complained. Mark sighed, Jane, can't you just try a bit harder? We're all hungry here. I was in disbelief. Try harder? I'm on crutches, Mark. What do you expect me to do? He just shrugged and left the kitchen with his mom, leaving me there, seething and in pain. You won't believe what happened next in my in-law nightmare. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, it did. A few weeks after my injury, Linda and Bob announced they were hosting Thanksgiving at our house and inviting their relatives over. The news hit me like a ton of bricks. Thanksgiving? Here? I asked, incredulous. How am I supposed to manage that with my leg like this? Linda just waved her hand dismissively. Oh, you won't have to do much. Just stay out of the way and let us handle it. I was fuming. This is my house, Linda. You can't just invite people over without asking me. That's when Mark stepped in. Jane, it's just a family gathering. Let's not make a big deal out of it. A big deal? Mark, I can barely walk, and now your parents are taking over our house for a party? I said, my voice rising. Bob chimed in, we thought it would be nice to have a family gathering here. After all, we're all living under the same roof now. And then Linda dropped another bombshell. Actually, Jane, we were thinking it might be best if you stayed somewhere else for a couple of weeks. With your leg and all, you'll just be in the way. I stared at her, completely dumbfounded. Stay somewhere else? In my own house. Yes, dear. Just for a couple of weeks. It's for the best, Linda continued, as if she was doing me a favor. I felt my blood boiling. You want me to leave my house so you can play host? That's insane. Mark chimed in, trying to sound reasonable. Jane, it's just for a short while. It'll be easier for everyone. Easier for everyone? This is my home, Mark. I'm not going anywhere. I shot back, my voice shaking with anger. Bob shrugged. We thought you'd appreciate not having to deal with the stress of the holiday. That was it. I lost it. Get out. Both of you, get out of my house now. I yelled, feeling a mix of rage and disbelief. Mark's face turned red. Jane, you're being unreasonable. They're my parents. You can't just kick them out. Unreasonable? They're taking over my home, and you're letting them. I was practically screaming now. Mark's expression hardened. If you can't respect my parents, maybe we shouldn't be together. Is that what you want? A divorce? I glared at him, feeling a rush of adrenaline. Without a word, I went to my desk drawer and pulled out a set of papers I had prepared, just in case things went south. What's this? Mark asked, his voice faltering as he took the papers from my hand. Divorce papers. I've had them ready for a while now, I said, my voice steady. Mark looked at me, then at the papers, and back at me. You're serious? You'd really go through with this? Yes, I am. I won't be bullied in my own house. Not by you, not by anyone, I said, feeling a strange sense of empowerment amidst the chaos. Linda and Bob just stood there, speechless. Mark looked like he had been punched in the gut. The room was thick with tension. Make your choice, Mark. Your parents or our marriage, I said, holding my ground. Mark laughed, a cold, hard sound that sent shivers down my spine. Fine, he said, and to my shock, he signed the papers right there and then. You'll regret this, Jane. You can't even support yourself without me. I watched him, feeling a mix of relief and disbelief. I'll manage, I said, though my voice was barely a whisper. He shrugged, your loss. Then he and his parents gathered their things and left. Just like that, my marriage was over. The moment the door closed behind them, I felt a strange sense of peace. I was alone, yes, but it was a better alternative to the constant tension and disrespect. The first thing I did was change the locks. It felt like I was securing my own personal fortress. Thanksgiving came around faster than I expected. I was still adjusting to my new reality, finding comfort in the quiet of my own company. Then, unexpectedly, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Mark, his parents, and a bunch of their relatives standing there, ready to celebrate. What are you doing here? I asked, stunned. We're here for Thanksgiving, Jane. Did you think we were serious about not coming? Mark said with a smug look. I couldn't believe the audacity. You're not welcome here anymore, Mark. This is my house, and you're not my family, not after what you did. Linda piped up, oh, come on, Jane. Don't be so petty. Let's just have a nice dinner. I stood my ground. No, you need to leave, now. Mark laughed, you can't kick us out. This was our family home. Not anymore. I've changed the locks, Mark. You gave up any right to this house when you signed those papers, I said, feeling a surge of empowerment. There was a moment of silence, then Mark's face turned red with anger. Fine, have it your way, he said, and they all turned and left. After the Thanksgiving showdown, I started to rebuild my life, and let me tell you, it wasn't easy, but it was mine. A few weeks after Mark and his family left for good, I was sitting in my quiet, peaceful living room when my best friend, Laura, dropped by. "Hey, Jane. How are you holding up?" Laura asked as she walked in, her eyes scanning the room. "Better than I expected, actually," I replied, offering her a smile. Laura sat down, looking at me closely. "You seem different. Stronger, somehow." I chuckled. "Yeah, I guess getting rid of dead weight does that to you." We both laughed, and in that moment, I felt lighter than I had in months. "But seriously, what's next for you, Jane?" Laura asked, her tone shifting to something more serious. I took a deep breath. "I'm going back to work. I've already started looking for accounting jobs. I'm not going to lie, it's a bit scary, but it's time to get back on my feet." Laura nodded. "That's the spirit. You were always the smartest one at the office. They'd be lucky to have you back." Her words meant a lot, and they gave me the boost I needed. I was ready to face the world again, on my own terms. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of job interviews and getting my life back on track. I landed a great position at a local firm, and for the first time in a long while, I was excited about the future. My home was mine again, my life was mine again. I had faced the worst and come out stronger. The soft hum of the air conditioning in my office was a stark contrast to the storm of thoughts swirling in my mind. I'm Anna, a 28-year-old lawyer. My life now is a far cry from the turmoil of my childhood, a past I kept locked away, even from those closest to me. The serenity of my office was shattered by the ringing of my phone. The display showed an unknown number, yet something about it felt ominously familiar. With a hesitant hand, I answered. "Anna speaking," I said, my voice a blend of professionalism and caution. "Anna, it's your father," came the voice, laced with a nervousness that did nothing to calm my rising apprehension. A chill ran through me. It had been over a decade since I last heard that voice, a voice that once meant safety and love but had become a symbol of betrayal and pain. "Why are you calling me?" I asked, my words sharp, cutting through the silence that followed his introduction. "I'm in trouble, Anna. Financially. I need your help," he said, his voice cracking slightly. His plea, however sincere it might have been, ignited a fire of resentment within me. "My help? Now you need me after all these years?" I retorted, disbelief and anger intermingling in my tone. "Yes, I wouldn't ask if it weren't serious. I'm really in a bind," he continued, desperation creeping into his voice. "You stopped being my father a long time ago. You can't just call me now and expect me to help," I responded, my voice cold and unwavering. There was a pause on the line, a heavy silence that felt like an unbridgeable chasm. "Anna, please. I'm still your dad," he said, a feeble attempt at rekindling a bond long extinguished. The word dad felt foreign, almost jarring. "A dad? You forfeited that title when you chose her over me," I said, the years of suppressed anger and hurt finding their way into my words. "You're my daughter." "I thought." "You thought wrong," I interrupted, cutting him off mid-sentence. "You made your choice years ago, and now I've made mine." His voice was a mix of pleading and despair. "Anna, I am sorry. I just need this one favor." The word sorry echoed in my office, a hollow and meaningless sound. "Sorry doesn't change the past." "I can't help you," I stated firmly and hung up. My childhood, before the age of 10, was filled with love and laughter, a testament to the wonderful life my parents and I shared in our small rented house. My mother, a beacon of joy and kindness, filled our days with warmth and our nights with stories and dreams. My father, once a playful and caring man, would spend evenings playing games with me or teaching me little things about the world. Our home was a cocoon of happiness, where every day was an adventure and every night a sweet dream. But our blissful life came to an abrupt halt with my mother's untimely death. The house that once echoed with laughter and love turned into a silent mausoleum of memories. I remember walking through the rooms, each corner a stark reminder of her absence. The loss was unbearable, not just for me but for my father too, who had lost the love of his life. However, the depth of his grief seemed to diminish quickly, much to my confusion and dismay. Within just a few months, he brought home Marissa, a woman who was to take a significant role in our lives. I recall the day he introduced her, a day that marked the end of my cherished childhood. "Anna, this is Marissa. She's going to be staying with us," my father announced one evening, his voice devoid of the warmth I was so accustomed to. I looked up at her, searching for a hint of motherly warmth or friendliness, but found none. Her presence was imposing, her gaze cold and calculating. From the very first moment, I sensed a change in the air, a shift that filled me with an unexplainable sense of dread. "Hello, Anna," Marissa said, her voice smooth yet devoid of genuine emotion. Her smile, rather than comforting, seemed to hide something sinister beneath its surface. In the days that followed, the house felt different, as if the walls themselves were recoiling from her presence. The cheerful memories of the past seemed to fade, replaced by a lingering unease that settled in every corner. I remember looking at Marissa, trying to find something redeeming or kind about her, but her every look, every gesture, seemed to be laced with an unspoken animosity. It was clear that she wasn't here to fill the void my mother had left, but to weave a new narrative, one in which I was an unwelcome part. As I watched her move around our home, a home that once felt safe and happy, I couldn't help but feel that her arrival was the beginning of something ominous. The way she looked at me, with eyes that seemed to hide more than they revealed, did not bode well for the future. The days following Marissa's arrival were like walking through a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. The house, once filled with my mother's laughter and love, now felt cold and unwelcoming. Marissa's presence cast a shadow over everything, turning even the simplest daily routines into a series of struggles. One morning, as I sat down for breakfast, I noticed my food tasted unusually salty. "Marissa, did you put too much salt in this?" I asked, my voice hesitant. "Oh, did I? It must have been a mistake." "Just eat it, Anna. Don't be so picky," she replied, her tone dismissive, almost mocking. The incidents grew more frequent and spiteful. I remember finding my clothes ruined after laundry. "Marissa, my clothes are all faded." "What happened?" I asked one day, holding up my once favorite dress, now discolored and unwearable. She glanced at it and shrugged nonchalantly. "Maybe the washing machine is acting up. Or perhaps it's time you stop wearing such childish clothes." I felt a surge of frustration but knew arguing would only make things worse. Feeling helpless, I turned to my father, hoping he would see through her facade. "Dad, Marissa is ruining my things. She's always mean to me," I said one evening, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and sadness. My father's reaction was far from what I had hoped for. "Anna, you're imagining things. Marissa is doing her best to fit into our family. Stop causing trouble," he said sternly, his words cutting deep. "But Dad, it's the truth." I protested, but he wouldn't listen. "That's enough, Anna. I don't want to hear any more of your accusations," he replied, his voice rising in anger. Each day was a battle, trying to navigate around Marissa's hostility and my father's indifference. The home that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a prison. I started spending more time in my room, trying to escape the constant tension that hung in the air. Living in that house of horrors, I felt alone and misunderstood. The safety and happiness that once filled those walls were replaced by fear and anxiety. Every day, I longed for the past, for the times when my mother's smile was enough to light up the entire room, a stark contrast to the darkness that now lingered in every corner. Living with Marissa became a daily ordeal of evasion and endurance. Her hostility towards me escalated from verbal jabs to physical abuse. It started subtly, a pinch on my arm or a twist on my stomach, always in places easily concealed under my clothes. The pain was sharp, a cruel reminder of my helplessness in her presence. I developed strategies to avoid her, constantly alert to her whereabouts in the house. I would take long routes to my room or wait until she was occupied before I moved around. Despite my efforts, there were times when she caught me off guard, and those moments always resulted in some form of pain. One day, while I was quietly reading in the living room, Marissa walked in and, for no apparent reason, pinched my arm hard, her nails digging into my skin. I winced in pain but bit back any cry of protest. She looked at me with a cold, triumphant smirk before walking away. During one of Grandma's rare visits, she noticed my cautious movements and the way I flinched when Marissa's voice echoed through the house. "Anna, is everything all right at home?" Grandma asked, her voice filled with concern. I looked at her, my heart aching to tell her the truth, but fear and the desire to protect her from worry held me back. "Yes, Grandma, everything's fine. Just a lot of schoolwork," I lied, offering her a forced smile. She seemed unsure but didn't press further. I felt a twinge of guilt for deceiving her, but I couldn't bear the thought of causing her any distress. That evening, as Grandma left, I saw Marissa watching from the window, her expression one of satisfaction. It was as if she relished the fact that she had control over me, that she could hurt me and get away with it. Her triumphant look was a clear message that she was the one in power, and I was just a helpless player in her twisted game. I retreated to my room, feeling trapped in a cycle of abuse and silence. The physical pain from Marissa's pinches and twists was bearable compared to the emotional turmoil I felt. School was my sanctuary, a place where I could briefly escape the misery of my home life. But even there, the shadows of my struggles at home began to seep through. My teacher, Mrs. Thompson, a kind-hearted woman who always encouraged her students, started to notice changes in me. One day, as I was handing in my homework, she gently grabbed my wrist, her eyes drawn to the bruises on my arm. "Anna, what happened here?" "These look like bruises," she said, her voice laced with concern. I quickly pulled my arm back, covering the bruises with my sleeve. "It's nothing, Mrs. Thompson. I fell while playing," I lied, avoiding her gaze. Mrs. Thompson didn't look convinced. "Anna, if there is something wrong, or if someone is hurting you, you can tell me. It's important to speak out," she urged, her eyes searching mine for the truth. I wanted to confide in her, to tell her everything about Marissa and how I lived in constant fear, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I forced a smile. "Really, Mrs. Thompson, I'm fine. It was just a silly accident." She gave me a long, thoughtful look, then nodded slowly. "All right, Anna. But remember, my door is always open. You're not alone," she said, giving me a reassuring smile. I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. Her kindness made it all the more difficult to maintain the facade that everything was all right. As I walked home that day, Mrs. Thompson's words echoed in my mind. I felt a mix of gratitude for her concern and a deep sense of loneliness from carrying my burdens alone. The thought of revealing the truth about my life at home was terrifying. I feared the consequences, what Marissa might do if she found out I had told someone. That night at dinner, I was quiet, lost in thought about Mrs. Thompson's offer to help. Marissa noticed my silence. "Why so quiet tonight, Anna? Cat got your tongue?" she asked in a mocking tone. I just shook my head and continued eating, trying to make myself as small and unnoticeable as possible. After dinner, as I lay in bed, the reality of my situation felt more overwhelming than ever. Mrs. Thompson's concern had shown me that people did care, yet the fear of what revealing the truth might bring kept me silent. I was caught between the desperation to tell someone and the fear of Marissa's retaliation, a balancing act that I navigated every day. The day my teacher, Mrs. Thompson, decided to involve my father was a day filled with anxiety and dread for me. I sat in the principal's office, fidgeting nervously, my mind racing with fear about how my father would react. When he finally arrived, his face was stern, his eyes betraying a mix of irritation and embarrassment. "What's this about, Anna? Why am I being called to your school like this?" he demanded, his voice sharp as he walked in. I glanced at Mrs. Thompson, seeking a semblance of support. Swallowing hard, I tried to find my voice. "Dad, Mrs. Thompson saw, she saw the bruises, I stammered, feeling the weight of his gaze on me. Before I could explain further, he interrupted, his anger palpable. Bruises? What are you talking about? Are you making up stories again? Mrs. Thompson stepped in, her tone firm yet calm. Mr. Smith, I'm concerned about Anna's well-being. The bruises on her arm don't seem accidental. We need to address this. My father's face turned a shade darker with anger. She's perfectly safe at home. Anna, are you spreading lies about our family? He turned towards me, his disappointment clear. The tears I had been holding back started to spill. It's not lies, Dad. Marissa, she's been hurting me. I managed to get out, the truth finally surfacing. His reaction was one of total disbelief. Marissa? That's ridiculous. She's been nothing but kind to you. I won't have you slandering her with these accusations. But Dad, it's the truth. I cried out, desperate for him to believe me. He stood up abruptly, his patience wearing thin. Enough of this. Tell Mrs. Thompson you made it all up. I obediently turned to the teacher and repeated his words. She nodded back and didn't say anything. Upon reaching home, without another word, he locked me in my room. Through the door, I could hear Marissa's voice, dripping with false concern. I told you she's just seeking attention, she said. I sat on my bed, feeling a profound sense of isolation and despair. The one person I thought I could always count on had turned his back on me. The walls of my room, which had once felt like my personal haven, now felt like the walls of a prison. I lay there, thinking about everything that had happened. The pain of the physical abuse was nothing compared to the emotional torment of being disbelieved and punished by my own father. It was a harsh realization that the person who was supposed to protect and love me unconditionally was now the source of my deepest pain. The days following my confinement in my room were some of the darkest I had ever experienced. Trapped and feeling utterly alone, I realized that my only hope lay in my grandmother, my father's mother. She was a kind and loving woman who had always shown me affection, but I had never dared to burden her with my troubles at home. One evening, when I was sure Marissa and my father were occupied, I mustered the courage to call my grandmother. My hands were shaking as I dialed her number. Hello, her familiar, warm voice came through the phone. Grandma, it's me, Anna, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Anna, my dear, how are you? She asked, her tone filled with genuine care. Tears welled up in my eyes as I replied, Grandma, I need help. Can I come and stay with you for a while? There was a moment of silence on the other end. What's wrong, Anna? Did something happen? I took a deep breath, the words rushing out. It's Marissa, she's been hurting me, and Dad won't believe me. I don't know what to do. I could hear the concern in her voice as she quickly responded, Of course, my dear. You come right over. I'll take care of this. The next day, my grandmother arrived. She was a small woman, but her presence filled the room. She confronted my father with a strength that surprised me. John, I'm taking Anna with me. She's not safe here, she declared firmly. My father, taken aback, tried to protest. Mom, you can't just take her. She's my daughter. Your daughter whom you failed to protect, she countered sharply. I won't stand by and watch her suffer. Marissa tried to intervene. She's just a child making up stories. You can't believe her over us. Grandma turned to Marissa, her eyes steely. I know a scared child when I see one. Anna is coming with me, and if you try to stop me, I'll take this matter to the authorities. My father, realizing he was defeated, didn't put up any further resistance. As I gathered my things, I saw Marissa's expression change from defiant to defeated. Leaving the house with my grandmother, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I felt safe. The car ride to Grandma's was quiet, but her presence was comforting. Once we arrived, she turned to me and said, You're safe now, Anna. You don't have to worry anymore. In my grandmother's house, I found the love and security that had been missing in my life. It was a haven where I could heal and regain my strength. The contrast between her nurturing home and the coldness of my father's house was stark. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe again, free from the fear and anxiety that had plagued me. Years had passed since I left my father's house to live with my grandmother. Her home had been a sanctuary, a place of healing and love. But time, as it does, moved on, and with it brought another wave of change. My beloved grandmother passed away, leaving a void that seemed impossible to fill. At the funeral, my father and Marissa showed up, their faces a mix of feigned sorrow and poorly disguised eagerness. It was clear they were more interested in what they might gain from her passing than mourning her loss. After the funeral, as we gathered at my grandmother's house, Marissa wasted no time. "Well, Anna, I suppose you'll be finding a new place to live now. This house and everything in it belongs to your father now," she said, her voice tinged with a barely concealed glee. My father nodded in agreement, his eyes scanning the room as if already planning what to do with the house. I couldn't help but smile, a reaction that seemed to confuse them. "Actually, that's where you're wrong," I said, the confidence in my voice taking them by surprise. "What do you mean?" my father asked, his expression shifting to one of confusion. I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. "Grandma left a will. She bequeathed the house and a substantial amount of money to me," I explained, watching as their expressions changed from confusion to shock. But you're just a child. I'm your father. I should be in charge of any inheritance you receive," my father stammered, his sense of entitlement clear. Marissa chimed in, her voice shrill. "Yes, until you come of age, your father will manage your property." Good prospects. Their reactions were almost amusing. "You don't give a damn about me so much that you didn't even wish me a happy birthday. I turned 18 a month ago. I'm legally an adult now. I make my own decisions," I stated firmly, relishing the look of realization dawning on their faces. My father's expression turned from shock to anger, then to a sort of desperate pleading. "Anna, you can't do this. We're your family." I looked at them, memories of my childhood flooding back. "You stopped being my family a long time ago," I said, my voice steady. Marissa stepped forward, her tone now begging, "At least let us stay in the house. We have nowhere else to go. We have not extended the lease of our house." I shook my head. "This is my house now. You'll need to find somewhere else." As they left, the weight of years of pain and neglect seemed to lift off my shoulders. I stood in the house that was now mine, a house filled with memories of my grandmother's love, and felt a sense of closure. The echoes of the past my father's call stirred remained. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling a tumult of emotions. Anger, betrayal, and a sense of injustice. But amid all that, there was also a sense of strength, a reminder of the resilience that had carried me through the darkest of times. I'm Martha, a 28-year-old massage therapist at a local hospital. My days usually involved routine treatments until Mrs. Rossi, a feisty retired woman with osteochondrosis, became my regular patient. She had a knack for prying into personal matters, which I usually navigated with a mix of professionalism and humor. One afternoon, as I was working on her stiff shoulders, Mrs. Rossi's voice cut through the room's tranquility. "Martha, dear, you have such magical hands. Tell me, what does a job like this pay?" I smiled, continuing my motions. "It's around $4,000 a month, Mrs. Rossi." She clucked her tongue in a mix of surprise and disappointment. "Only $4,000? I thought such a skill would fetch more." I shrugged, keeping the conversation light. "Well, it's enough for me. I enjoy the work more than anything." Changing gears, she suddenly said, "You know who you should meet? My son, Antonio. He's the owner of that Italian restaurant downtown. A real catch, if I may say so." I hesitated, recalling the few times I saw Antonio. He was quite charming and easy on the eyes. "I don't know, Mrs. Rossi. I'm quite busy with work." "Oh, nonsense," she exclaimed. "A young, attractive woman like you shouldn't be alone. Let me arrange something." Before I could protest, she had already made up her mind. True to her word, she set us up on a date at his restaurant. Antonio was more than I remembered, charming, with a warm smile and eyes that sparkled with humor. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, filled with laughter and shared interests. Weeks turned into months, and our casual dates grew into a serious relationship. One evening, as we walked along the river, Antonio stopped and looked into my eyes. "Martha, I've never met anyone like you. Will you marry me?" His proposal took me by surprise, but it felt right. "Yes, Antonio, I will." Our wedding was a small affair but full of love and joy. Afterward, Antonio suggested, "Why don't we move in with my mom? Her house is big, and we could save some money for our future." The idea seemed practical, and I agreed. Initially, life in the Rossi household was harmonious. I helped with chores, and we both contributed to the family expenses. Little did I know that this new chapter of my life would soon take a challenging turn. Living in the Rossi household started off as an agreeable arrangement, but a few months into our marriage, I began to notice a shift in responsibilities. It was gradual at first, but soon, the burden of household chores fell almost entirely on my shoulders. One weary evening, after spending the whole day relieving tense muscles and soothing aching joints at the hospital, I came home to a scene of chaos, dirty dishes piled high, laundry scattered, and the living room looking like it had been hit by a small tornado. Exhausted, I found Antonio sprawled on the sofa, engrossed in a football game. "Antonio, the house is a mess. Can you help me clean up?" I asked, trying to hide my frustration. He glanced around, seemingly oblivious. "Oh, it's not that bad, Martha. I had a rough day at the restaurant, lots of issues to deal with." I started picking up, feeling the day's fatigue weigh me down. "But you've been home for a while now, and I've just got back. It's only fair we both contribute." He let out a non-committal grunt, eyes glued to the screen. "You're better at this stuff than I am. I'd just get in the way." This pattern continued, growing more defined with each passing day. I found myself doing all the cooking, cleaning, and managing the home, while Antonio's contributions became increasingly scarce. A few days later, I decided to have a serious talk with him. After dinner, which I had prepared, I broached the topic. "Antonio, we need to discuss the housework. It's becoming overwhelming for me to handle everything alone." He looked up from his phone, seemingly annoyed. "What's there to discuss, Martha? You're great at managing the house. I'm busy with the restaurant." His dismissive attitude stung. "But we're a team, Antonio. It's not just about being good at something. We should share these responsibilities." He sighed, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "Look, I'll try to help out more, but you know my work is demanding. I'm running a whole business, not just giving massages." I bit back a sharp retort, feeling belittled and misunderstood. "It's not about comparing jobs, Antonio. It's about supporting each other." As the days turned into weeks, the situation didn't improve. Antonio's promises to help more around the house remained unfulfilled. I found myself spending my few free hours doing household chores, feeling more like a housekeeper than his wife. One evening, as I collapsed on the couch after a long day, the reality of my situation hit me hard. The balance in our marriage had shifted dangerously, leaving me drained and undervalued. I realized that something needed to change, but I wasn't sure how to make Antonio see it too. The day Luca and his family moved in marked the beginning of an entirely new, exhausting chapter in our lives. Antonio broke the news to me nonchalantly, as if it was a minor change. "Martha, Luca lost his job. They can't pay rent, so they'll stay with us for a while," he explained, while I was setting the table for dinner. I stopped in my tracks, the plates in my hands feeling heavier. "For how long, Antonio? Our house isn't that big, and I'm already stretched thin." He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Just for a bit, until Luca finds a new job. It's family, Martha. We can't turn them away." Their arrival turned our already bustling household upside down. Anna, Luca's wife, seemed more interested in her social media than in managing her children or helping around the house. Their 3 kids, aged between 3 and 8, were little bundles of chaotic energy, leaving a trail of mess wherever they went. One afternoon, after stepping on a toy car for the umpteenth time, I approached Anna, who was scrolling through her phone. "Anna, could you please keep an eye on the kids? The house is turning into a war zone." She looked up, annoyance flickering in her eyes. "Martha, I'm busy with my own stuff. You don't have kids, you wouldn't understand." "But Anna, the mess and noise are overwhelming. I work too, and it's becoming impossible to manage," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She scoffed. "Well, I guess you just need to get better at multitasking, then." I walked away, feeling a mixture of anger and helplessness. When I brought it up with Antonio, hoping for some support, his response was disheartening. "Babe, they're family. We need to be there for them," he said, not looking up from the TV. "But what about us, our home? It's turning into chaos," I protested. He waved his hand dismissively. "It's not permanent. Besides, you handle things so well, Martha. You're great at this." Weeks turned into months with no sign of improvement. Luca spent his days on the computer, claiming to be job hunting, while the kids ran around unchecked. Anna rarely lifted a finger to help, leaving me to deal with the aftermath of their daily tornado. I started to dread coming home. My once peaceful haven was now a source of endless stress. Each day, I walked into a house that no longer felt like mine, catering to a family that barely acknowledged my exhaustion. The burden of cooking, cleaning, and maintaining order fell entirely on me. Despite my pleas for help or even just a little consideration, I was met with the same responses. "You're so good at this, Martha," or "it's just for a little longer." I lay awake at night, wondering how a situation meant to be temporary had become my new, overwhelming reality. I felt trapped, undervalued, and utterly alone in a house full of people. The funny thing is that I invested my entire salary in their family every month, all of $4,000. And they took it for granted. The tension in the house had been building like a pressure cooker, and it finally exploded one hectic evening. I came home to the usual chaos and mess, utterly exhausted from my workday. The sight of the unkempt house was the last straw. "Antonio!" I yelled, finding him lounging on the couch with a beer in hand. "This house is a disaster. I'm busting my back at work and I come home to this mess every day." Antonio looked up, irritation flashing in his eyes. "Oh, cut the drama, Martha. It's just a bit messy. You're acting like it's the end of the world." I couldn't contain my frustration. "A bit messy? Look around. It's like a pigsty and I'm the only one cleaning it up." That's when he lost it. He stood up abruptly, towering over me. "Lazy? You call this lazy? I work my ass off at the restaurant while you just rub people's backs. And now you whine about a few dishes." His harsh words felt like a slap in the face. "That's not fair, Antonio. I'm not your maid. This is supposed to be our home, not just mine to clean." Before I could say more, Mrs. Rossi chimed in, her voice dripping with disdain. "Oh, please, Martha. You're just a freeloader here, living in my house, using our things. And you have the nerve to complain." I was taken aback by her vicious tone. "A freeloader? Mrs. Rossi, I contribute to this house, I work hard too." She scoffed. "Work hard? Ha! A real woman takes care of her home and family. You're just sloppy and ungrateful." Their words echoed in my head, each one a stinging affirmation of how little they valued me. I stood there, shaking with a mix of anger, shock, and hurt. Antonio didn't let up. "You should be thankful, Martha. You have a roof over your head because of us. Maybe if you managed your time better, the house wouldn't be such a mess." I felt a surge of defiance. "I am not your servant, Antonio. I am your wife, and I deserve respect." But it was like talking to a brick wall. They had their minds set, seeing me as nothing more than an accessory to their home. Lying in bed that night, I realized that this wasn't a home, it was a prison. And I was trapped with people who saw my efforts as trivial and my presence as a nuisance. It was a sobering, painful realization that I was in a battle I was losing. The day Antonio announced he wanted a divorce felt like a surreal nightmare. It happened during one of our rare family dinners, where the tension was already thick enough to cut with a knife. I was passing the salad when Antonio cleared his throat. "Everyone, I have something to say," he announced, his voice eerily calm. "I want a divorce, Martha." I froze, the bowl in my hands almost slipping. "What? Antonio, what are you talking about?" His gaze was cold, devoid of the warmth I once knew. "I've met someone else, Martha. She's better for me." The room went silent. Even Mrs. Rossi looked shocked, but not for the reasons I hoped. "How much does she earn?" she blurted out, her priorities crystal clear. $8,000 a month, Antonio replied proudly, as if he'd won some prize. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "You're leaving me for money?" He shrugged, the man I married nowhere in sight. "It's not just about the money, Martha. She understands me, unlike you." I was struggling to process everything. "And you think this is okay? To drop this bomb in front of everyone?" Mrs. Rossi piped up, her voice sharp. "Well, it's about time he found someone worthy. Someone who can actually take care of him." The sting of her words was overshadowed by the utter betrayal I felt from Antonio. He slid the divorce papers across the table. "Just sign these, Martha. Let's end this amicably." My hands trembled as I took the pen. I felt numb, the reality of the situation sinking in. Amicably? After everything I've done for this family? Antonio's expression was cold, detached. "It's for the best, Martha. You'll see." With a heavy heart and a sense of unreal detachment, I signed the papers. The room remained silent, the only sound being the scratching of the pen on paper. As I stood up, the weight of the situation finally hit me. "I hope she's worth it, Antonio. I really do," I said, my voice laced with a relief I couldn't hide. I packed my things that night, the silence of the house echoing the hollowness I felt inside. Antonio and his family watched, their faces a mix of surprise and confusion at my calm demeanor. Little did they know, inside, I was even rejoicing at the thought of being free from this toxic environment. I closed the door behind me, leaving behind a life that was no longer mine. The night air felt crisp and refreshing, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere I had just escaped. As I walked away, I realized this was not an end, but a new beginning. Moving into my rented apartment was like stepping into a new world. I took all the furniture and fancy appliances I had bought, leaving behind nothing but empty spaces in Antonio's family home. It caused quite the uproar. I still remember the day Mrs. Rossi and Anna confronted me as I was loading the last of my things into the moving truck. "You can't just take all this stuff. It belongs in the house," Mrs. Rossi shouted, her face red with anger. I turned to face her, feeling a surge of defiance. "Actually, I bought all of this with my own money. It's mine, and I'm taking it with me." Anna chimed in, her tone dripping with disdain. "You're such a selfish brat, Martha. You think you can just walk away and take everything?" I shrugged, not letting their words get to me. "Call it what you want, but I'm done being your maid and your family's cash cow. I'm starting over." They were fuming as I drove away, but I felt an immense sense of relief, like I had shed a heavy burden. Settling into my new place, I reveled in the peace and quiet. It was small, but it was mine. The day I received the job offer from the prestigious medical center was the icing on the cake. The salary was nearly double what I was making before. I remember calling Sarah to share the news. "Guess what? I got a job offer from that famous medical center. It's a big leap in my career, and the pay is amazing." Sarah's excitement mirrored mine. "Martha, that's fantastic. You totally deserve this. You're going to kill it." The conversation was a stark contrast to the ones I had in Antonio's house. Here was a friend who believed in me and celebrated my achievements, not someone who saw me as just a means to an end. My first day at the new job was exhilarating. I was greeted with respect. Mr. Johnson, the center's director, welcomed me personally. "Martha, we're thrilled to have you on board. Your expertise is going to be a great asset to our team," he said with a genuine smile. I couldn't help but beam with pride. "Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I'm excited to be here and contribute to the center." Leaving the chaos of Antonio's family home and stepping into this new role was empowering. It felt like I had finally taken control of my life, steering it in the direction I wanted. The days of being undervalued and overburdened were behind me. Now, I was recognized for my worth, both professionally and personally. That night, as I sat in my quiet living room, sipping a cup of tea, I felt a profound sense of peace. The struggles and hardships had led me to this moment, and I was grateful for the journey. For the first time in a long while, I was genuinely excited about what the future held. It was a regular evening in my new life when I heard a forceful knock on my door. I opened it to find my ex-mother-in-law, Mrs. Rossi, standing there with an expression that reeked of desperation and frustration. "What do you want, Mrs. Rossi?" I asked, not hiding my annoyance. She barged in, her voice laced with urgency. "Martha, you need to come back. Antonio's restaurant is tanking. We're drowning in debt." I couldn't help but snort. "Come back? After the way you all treated me? You've got some nerve." She glared at me. "You're part of this family. It's your responsibility to help us out." I crossed my arms, feeling a surge of defiance. "My only responsibility is to myself. I'm not your family's ATM, Mrs. Rossi." She was seething. "You ungrateful wench. You think you're too good for us now, huh? Sitting pretty in your fancy apartment?" I shook my head, amused by her audacity. "I'm not ungrateful. I'm just done being used. What happened to that woman Antonio left me for?" Mrs. Rossi's face twisted in displeasure. "That gold digger? She left him as soon as the money troubles started. Shows what she was really after." I burst into laughter, the irony too rich to ignore. Well, looks like karma really does come around. Her eyes narrowed. "You think this is funny? We're struggling here, Martha." I leaned against the door frame, my resolve firm. "Not my circus, not my monkeys anymore, Mrs. Rossi. I've moved on. You should too." She huffed, her anger palpable. "You'll regret this, Martha. When you're all alone and miserable, you'll wish you'd helped." I smiled, the sense of freedom filling me with confidence. "I doubt that. Goodbye, Mrs. Rossi. And don't come back." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. As I locked it, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. That chapter of my life was closed for good. I was finally free from the toxic grasp of a family that never truly valued me. My life was my own now, and I intended to live it on my terms. Life after the divorce and the last encounter with Mrs. Rossi felt like a breath of fresh air. I was thriving in my new job and enjoying my newfound independence. One day, while enjoying a coffee break at the wellness center, my colleague Mike dropped by. "Hey, Martha, I heard about your run-in with the ex-mother-in-law. You okay?" Mike asked, concern in his eyes. I chuckled, shaking my head. "More than okay, Mike. It's like a bad sitcom, you know? I'm just glad it's over." Mike smiled. "You've got some guts, Martha. Most people wouldn't have handled it as well as you did." I sipped my coffee, feeling a sense of pride. "I guess I just reached my limit, Mike. No more drama for me." The conversation shifted to work, and as I talked with Mike, I realized how much my life had improved. I was no longer weighed down by the negativity and manipulation of my former family. Later that week, I caught up with Sarah over dinner. She had been my steadfast supporter through all the ups and downs. "You look great, Martha. Really, like a weight's been lifted off your shoulders, Sarah observed as we sat in a cozy restaurant. I smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude. Thanks, Sarah. It's been a journey, but I'm finally at a place where I feel happy and in control. Sarah raised her glass. To new beginnings and to a friend who's shown what strength really is. I clinked my glass with hers. To new beginnings and to friends who stand by you through thick and thin. The evening was filled with laughter and positive conversations, a stark contrast to the tense and uncomfortable dinners at my former in-laws. As I lay in bed that night, I reflected on the changes in my life. I had faced adversity, but it had led to growth and new opportunities. I had learned my worth and vowed never to let anyone treat me as less than I deserved. The following morning, I received a text from Antonio. It was short and seemed filled with regret. I'm sorry for everything, Martha. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me. I stared at the message for a long moment. Forgiving Antonio wasn't about absolving him of his mistakes, it was about freeing myself from any lingering bitterness. I typed a response, my heart light and free. Antonio, I've moved on. I forgive you, but more for my peace than yours. Take care. Sending the text felt like closing a chapter. I was no longer bound by the past, and the future looked bright. I had come out of this ordeal stronger and more resilient. As I prepared for work, I felt a sense of excitement about the possibilities that lay ahead. My journey had taught me about resilience, self-worth, and the power of moving forward. I was ready for whatever life had in store for me, and I knew that no matter what, I had the strength to face it head-on. I always thought my life was pretty normal, just like anyone else's. My name is Sarah, and I've spent the last 17 years married to Mike. We've got 3 boys, Jake, the oldest at 15, always buried in his books, Sam, the middle one, 13, a soccer fanatic, and little Max, 10, the comedian of the family. Our life seemed like a typical family's. I was a housewife, happy to be one, while Mike worked as the director of his family's company. We were doing all right, especially since I had some income from investments I made with the money my grandma left me. It wasn't much, but it helped. Things started changing slowly. It was subtle at first, but then it became too obvious to ignore. Mike, who used to be affectionate and caring, began acting differently. His warm smiles turned cold, and his gentle words became harsh. It was a regular Thursday evening. The kids were upstairs, and I was setting up the dinner table when Mike walked in. He looked tired, or maybe just annoyed. I couldn't tell anymore. Hey, Mike. How was work today? I asked, trying to keep the conversation light. He shrugged, barely looking at me. Same as always, Sarah. Exhausting and endless. I handed him a plate of his favorite pasta, hoping to cheer him up. Well, maybe this will help. He poked around the food with his fork, not eating. Then, out of nowhere, he said, Sarah, have you looked at yourself lately? You've really let yourself go. His words hit me like a punch. What do you mean? I asked, my voice trembling a bit. You know what I mean. You used to take care of yourself, look good. Now, it's like you don't even try. I felt my face burning. I'm taking care of our home, our kids. I don't always have time for myself. He scoffed. That's just an excuse, Sarah. You could make the time if you wanted to. I was stunned. Mike never used to be like this. He was the one who always told me I was beautiful, no matter what. I'm not some model, Mike. I'm your wife, the mother of your children. And that's exactly why you should try harder. Look at you. How am I supposed to take you to any company events looking like this? His words stung. I felt small, insignificant. I didn't realize my looks were so important to you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. They are, Sarah. They are. And right now, you're just not cutting it. I stood there, feeling a mix of anger, hurt, and confusion. This wasn't the man I married. This was someone else, someone I didn't recognize. The rest of the evening passed in silence. I cleaned up the dishes, trying to process what just happened. Mike went to the living room, probably to avoid any more conversation. It wasn't just a one-off comment from Mike. The criticisms kept coming, each one sharper than the last. It felt like I was living with a stranger. He'd always been so supportive, but now, it was like he was looking for things to pick on. One evening, we were sitting in the living room. The boys were out at friends' houses, and it was just the two of us, which had become increasingly rare. I thought maybe we could have a nice chat, like we used to. So, Mike, Jake's been talking about colleges already. Can you believe it? Our boy is growing up, I said, trying to start a light conversation. Mike, however, seemed disinterested. He muttered, not looking up from his phone. I sighed, feeling the familiar sting of being ignored. You know, I was thinking we could do something as a family this weekend. Maybe go for a picnic, like old times. He finally looked up, but his expression was far from warm. Sarah, why do you always avoid talking about the real issues? I was taken aback. What issues, Mike? You, Sarah, you and how you've just given up on yourself. There it was again, that harsh tone that had become all too familiar. Mike, I haven't given up on myself. I'm just busy with the boys, the house. He cut me off. No, that's not an excuse. Look at you. You wear the same old clothes, your hair's always a mess. It's embarrassing. I felt a lump in my throat. Embarrassing? Is that what you think of me? Yes, it is. I mean, when was the last time you even tried to look nice for me? For us. I tried to remember the last time I had dressed up. It had been a while, but did it really matter that much? Mike, I'm your wife, not a doll to dress up. I have responsibilities. And part of those responsibilities is to be presentable, Sarah. Not just roam around like you don't care. I stood up, feeling my anger rising. I do care, Mike. I care about our family. But if you're so concerned about appearances, maybe you should look at yourself too. When was the last time you did something for us, for the family? He stood up too, his face red. That's different, Sarah. I work all day to provide for this family. And I work all day at home to keep this family running. But you wouldn't understand that, would you? There was a tense silence. Then, Mike spoke, his voice cold. Maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I need someone who understands me better. Those words felt like a slap. Is that what you want, Mike? Someone else? He didn't answer. Instead, he just walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, feeling more alone than ever. Despite the heavy air between us, I decided to make a change. Not for Mike, but for myself. I joined a local fitness club, thinking maybe a bit of exercise would help clear my mind. It was a sunny Tuesday morning when I told Mike about it. We were in the kitchen, he was getting ready for work, and I was fixing breakfast. Mike, I joined a fitness club, I said, a bit nervously. He raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued for the first time in weeks. Really? That's unexpected. Yeah, I figured it was time to do something for myself. He chuckled, but it wasn't a warm sound. Well, let's see how long that lasts. I bit my lip, holding back a sharp retort. I'm serious about it, Mike. He shrugged, finishing his coffee. We'll see, Sarah. We'll see. That conversation stayed with me as I headed to the fitness club. Determined to prove him wrong, I threw myself into the workouts. I started jogging in the park every morning, feeling a sense of accomplishment with each stride. One morning, a couple of weeks into my new routine, I was jogging in the park. The air was crisp, and I was pushing myself harder than usual. I wanted to get home before Mike left for work, to show him I was sticking to it. I was so focused on my pace that I didn't see the uneven patch of ground. My foot caught, and I stumbled, falling hard on the path. Pain shot through my leg, and I knew immediately something was wrong. Limping back home, I was a mix of pain and frustration. This was the last thing I needed. Mike was still home when I got back. He looked surprised to see me limping. "What happened to you?" he asked, more curious than concerned. "I fell while jogging," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the pain. He snorted. "Jogging? More like tumbling, it seems." I winced, both from the pain and his words. "It's not funny, Mike. I think I sprained my leg." He leaned against the counter, a smirk on his face. "Well, what did you expect? You can't just jump into these things at your age." I felt a surge of anger. "My age? What's that supposed to mean?" He shrugged. "It means you're not exactly young anymore. These things happen." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So, you're saying I shouldn't even try?" "I'm saying maybe you should have thought it through a bit more. Starting to work out all of a sudden, at your age, it's bound to end like this." I leaned against the wall, trying to steady myself. I was doing it for myself, Mike. To feel better. He shook his head. "Well, looks like that backfired, didn't it?" I didn't have the energy to argue. I just wanted to sit down and deal with the pain in my leg. Mike left for work, and I was left alone, feeling both physically and emotionally hurt. It seemed like no matter what I did, it just wasn't good enough for him. The days following my fall were tough. My leg was in a brace, and I felt trapped in my own home. Mike's attitude didn't help either. It was like he found joy in my misfortune. It was a Wednesday afternoon, the kids were at school, and I was sitting in the living room with my leg propped up. That's when I heard the knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hobbled to the door, curious and a bit cautious. Opening the door, I was met with a sight that knocked the wind out of me. A young woman, probably in her late 20s, stood there. She was dressed sharply, and there was a confidence in her posture that was hard to miss. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to mask my surprise. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my braced leg. "You must be Sarah. I'm Amanda. I think we need to talk about Mike." My heart sank. "Mike? What about him?" She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "I think it's time you knew. Mike and I have been seeing each other." I felt like I had been punched. "What are you talking about?" She walked past me into the living room, making herself at home. "I'm talking about Mike, your husband. We're in love, and he's going to leave you for me." I followed her, my mind racing. "That's impossible. Mike would never." She cut me off. "Oh, but he would. And he is. He's tired of this." She gestured around. "And tired of you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This is some kind of joke, right? Mike loves me. We have a family. Amanda laughed, a cold, hard sound. "Love? Please. He's bored with you. He needs someone young, someone exciting. Not a housewife who can't even take care of herself." I felt tears stinging my eyes, but I fought them back. "You don't know anything about us, about our life." "I know enough. I know that Mike wants more, and I'm more than you'll ever be." Her words were like daggers, each one cutting deeper. "You're wrong. He won't leave me. He can't." Amanda stood up, ready to leave. "Believe what you want, Sarah. But it's happening. Mike is mine now. And there's nothing you can do about it." She walked out, leaving me standing there, feeling a mix of shock, anger, and disbelief. That evening, when Mike came home, I confronted him. "Mike, we need to talk. Now." He looked surprised but nodded. "What's wrong?" "A woman came here today. Amanda. She said you're leaving me for her." Mike's face changed, and I knew. I just knew. "It's true, isn't it?" I whispered, the reality sinking in. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Yes, it's true. I didn't know how to tell you." I felt numb. "How long, Mike? How long have you been lying to me?" "It's not about the time, Sarah. It's about us, about what we've become. I shook my head, tears finally escaping. What we've become? You mean what you've made us become? He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I'm sorry, Sarah. I never meant to hurt you. But I can't stay in this marriage. I need more. I looked at him, the man I had loved for so long, and felt nothing but emptiness. You want a divorce? He nodded. Yes, I do. It was like my entire world had crumbled in an instant. Mike, the love of my life, was leaving me for another woman. A woman who had the audacity to come to my home and tell me to my face. But in that moment, something inside me shifted. I wouldn't let this break me. I had my boys, and I had myself. Mike had made his choice, and now I had to make mine. I'll give you your divorce, Mike. But you're going to regret this. One day, you'll see what you've lost. He didn't say anything, just walked away. And I was left there, alone, but with a newfound determination. This wasn't the end for me. It was just the beginning. In the days after Mike dropped the bombshell, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Betrayal, anger, sadness, they all took turns controlling me. But amidst this chaos, a bold idea started to form. I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. One evening, as Mike and I sat awkwardly in the living room, a room that once echoed with laughter and love, I decided it was time to confront the future. Mike, we need to talk about the kids, I said, breaking the icy silence. He looked up, clearly uneasy. Yeah, I've been thinking about that too. I've made a decision, I continued, my voice steady. I'm going to move out. Mike's eyes widened. Move out? What about the boys? They're staying with you, I said firmly. He was taken aback. What? No, Sarah, you can't be serious. They need their mother. I leaned forward, my resolve unwavering. They also need their father, Mike. And you need to understand what it takes to be a parent. Full-time, not just weekends or holidays. Mike ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. Sarah, this is crazy. You can't just dump the kids on me and walk away. I'm not dumping them, Mike. I'm giving you a chance to step up. To be the father they deserve. Mike stood up, pacing the room. And what about Amanda? How am I supposed to explain this to her? I shrugged. That's your problem, Mike. You chose her. Now you have to deal with the consequences. Mike stopped pacing and looked at me, desperation in his eyes. Sarah, please. Don't do this. It's not fair to the boys. I stood up too, meeting his gaze. What's not fair is what you're doing to us. You made your bed, Mike. Now you have to lie in it. He sank into the couch, defeated. I can't believe you're doing this. I felt a pang of sympathy, but I pushed it away. This was about more than just me and Mike now. It was about our boys and their future. I'll come to see them, talk to them, but they need to stay with you, I said, my voice softer. Mike nodded, resigned. Okay, Sarah, if that's what you think is best. I knew this was going to be hard, on all of us. But it was a decision that had to be made. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking control of my life again. I talked to the children and told them about my plan. They approved it, and ever made suggestions. Perhaps I was too cruel to them and my husband, but I needed to fight back, including for the sake of my son's future. After moving out, I found myself in a small apartment, a stark contrast to the house I had called home for so many years. The space was quiet, too quiet at times, but it gave me a chance to think, to plan my next steps. It wasn't long before the first phone call came. I was sipping coffee one morning when my phone rang. It was Mike, and he sounded frazzled. Sarah, you need to take the kids. I can't do this, he blurted out as soon as I answered. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. Mike, We agreed. They're staying with you. But Sarah, it's too much. I can't handle it. Work is hectic, and Amanda, she's not coping with them around, he explained, his voice tinged with desperation. I felt a twinge of satisfaction, but I pushed it away. You wanted a life with her, Mike. This is part of it. The boys are your responsibility too. Mike's frustration was palpable. They don't listen to me, Sarah. They're always asking for you. It's a mess here. That sounds like parenting, Mike. Welcome to my world for the past 15 years, I replied, a hint of gloating in my voice. There was a pause, then Mike said, I didn't think it would be this hard. Well, it is. You'll have to figure it out, just like I did. We ended the call shortly after, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. Mike was finally getting a taste of the life he had always taken for granted. The next call came a few weeks later, this time from Amanda. Her voice was high-pitched and frantic. Sarah, you have to take these kids. They're unbearable. They don't listen to anything I say. She practically screamed into the phone. I couldn't help but smirk. They're just being kids, Amanda. What did you expect? They're ruining our life, Sarah. Mike is always tired, and we never have any time together. It's like living in a zoo, she complained. I leaned back in my chair, enjoying the moment. Well, Amanda, maybe you should have thought about that before getting involved with a married man with 3 kids. Amanda huffed. This is your fault, Sarah. You should be taking care of them, not me. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. No, Amanda. This is the life you chose. You wanted Mike, and everything that comes with him. Deal with it. The call ended with Amanda cursing, and I couldn't help but laugh. It felt good to see her squirm, to see them both realizing how much they had underestimated me and the life I had built around our family. The day I'd been dreading finally arrived, the legal meeting to hash out the divorce and custody details. I walked into the lawyer's office, my nerves taut. There was Mike, looking like a shadow of his former self, and Amanda, her face twisted in annoyance. My lawyer, Mr. Harris, gave me an encouraging nod as we sat down across from them. The mediator, a no-nonsense guy, started off with, "We're here to discuss custody arrangements first." Mike cleared his throat, looking anywhere but at me. "I want joint custody. I can't handle them full-time." I almost laughed at the absurdity. Really, Mike? After all your big talk? Now you're backing down. Amanda piped up, her voice sharp. Sarah, stop being such a vindictive witch. You're just trying to make our lives hell. I turned to her, my voice icy. No, Amanda. I'm making sure my kids get what they deserve. A stable home, not a circus. Mike's lawyer, some slick young thing, tried to smooth things over. Let's keep this civil. We're here for the kids' sake. I was about to retort when Mike blurted out, I don't even need the damn kids. They're just a nuisance. The room went silent. Even Amanda looked at him, shocked. That's when Mike's father, who'd been silent till now, erupted. You ungrateful brat, he bellowed at Mike. I'm cutting you off. No more money, no more cushy job at the company. You've disgraced us. Mike's face drained of color. Dad, you can't do that. I need that job. His father was unmoved. You've made your bed, now lie in it. Turning to the mediator, I said firmly, I want full alimony for the boys. They shouldn't suffer because their father's a selfish coward. Mike's lawyer started to protest, but Mike shut him down with a wave of his hand. Fine, she gets what she wants. Amanda was silent, her earlier bravado gone. She looked from Mike to his father, realizing the gravy train had just derailed. As we wrapped up, I felt a strange mix of triumph and sadness. It wasn't a win, not really. But it was a step towards a new life for me and the boys. The dust had settled from the legal showdown, and I was starting to build a new life in a spacious apartment I had rented for me and the boys. It was different, but it felt like a fresh start. One evening, while I was unpacking some boxes, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find Mike standing there, looking miserable. "Sarah, can we talk?" he asked, his voice low. I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. "Make it quick, Mike. The boys will be home soon." He walked in, glancing around the new place. "Nice apartment," he muttered. I folded my arms. "What do you want, Mike?" He took a deep breath. I've made a mistake. I was wrong. I want to come back." I looked at him, my heart hardening. "Come back? After everything? You must be joking." He shook his head. "I'm not. I've lost everything, Sarah. My job, Amanda left me. I've got nothing." I felt a pang of something, but it wasn't enough to sway me. "You made your choices, Mike. You have to live with them." Mike's eyes filled with tears. "Please, Sarah. I'm begging you. I need my family." I sighed. "Your family needed you, but you walked away. You can't just come back because you're alone now." Mike looked defeated. "So, that's it? We're really over?" I nodded. "Yes, Mike. We're over. It's time for both of us to move on." He stood there for a moment longer, then turned and left. I watched him go, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. But mostly, I felt free. Later that night, as I tucked the boys into bed in their new rooms, Jake, the eldest, looked up at me. "Mom, are you okay?" I smiled, stroking his hair. "Yes, Jake. I'm more than okay. We're going to be just fine." He nodded. "I'm glad. I like it here. It's different, but it's good." I kissed his forehead. Different can be good. We're starting a new chapter. As I turned off the lights and left their room, I knew that this was just the beginning. A new beginning for me and my boys. We had each other, and that was all we needed. Growing up, I always knew I was different from the rest of my family. My name's Jenny, and I come from a long line of restaurant owners. My dad, Joe, is a big, loud man who runs our family restaurant with an iron fist. Mom, Linda, is his perfect partner, always busy managing the staff. Then there's my older brother, Mike, the golden boy, groomed to take over the business. I remember sitting at the dinner table one night, the air thick with the aroma of Dad's famous roast. Mom was going on about some new recipe they were trying out. "Jenny, you'll love this one. It's got that fancy herb you like." "What's it called again?" Mom asked, her eyes sparkling. "Thyme," I mumbled, picking at my food. Mike laughed from across the table, his mouth full. "Who cares about some dumb herb? Wait till you see the new grill Dad's getting for the restaurant. That's the real deal." Dad nodded, his eyes on me. "Speaking of the restaurant, Jenny, when are you gonna start taking an interest? You're not getting any younger, you know." I tried to make myself small in my chair. "I don't know, Dad. I like being outside, with the plants and stuff." Mom sighed, exchanging a look with Dad. "Plants? What are you gonna do with plants? You need a real job, Jenny. Something to fall back on." I remember feeling a knot in my stomach. It was the same conversation every time. No one in my family got it. No one except Grandma Rose. Grandma Rose lived in a small house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by the most beautiful garden I'd ever seen. She was different from my parents, gentle, patient, and she understood me in a way no one else did. I would often escape to her house, away from the endless talk of the restaurant. One day, I found her in the garden, her hands deep in the soil. "Jenny, dear, come help me plant these tulips," she said, her face bright with a smile. I sat down beside her, feeling the cool dirt on my hands. "Grandma, why don't Mom and Dad understand? I love this. I love being here with the plants." Grandma Rose wiped her brow and looked at me with those wise, old eyes. Your parents just want what's best for you, Jenny. But they don't see the world the same way we do. There's magic in these plants, in the earth. It's okay to be different. I clung to Grandma Rose's words, even as the pressure from my family grew. Mike would often taunt me, calling me the gardener in a tone that made it sound like an insult. Hey, gardener, you gonna plant some lettuce for tonight's salad? He'd jeer, his friends laughing behind him. I'd just roll my eyes and walk away. I knew they didn't get it. They didn't see the beauty in a single leaf, the peace in a morning dew. But I did. And in those moments, with my hands in the soil, I felt like I was where I belonged. High school graduation was like standing at a crossroads, and I, Jenny, was about to take the road less traveled by my family. The house was buzzing with excitement over Mike's plans to join Dad at the restaurant. Amidst it all, I felt like a spectator in my own life. One evening, we were all gathered in the living room. Dad was going on about expanding the restaurant, his eyes gleaming with ambition. Mike, you're going to be right at the heart of this, he said, clapping my brother on the back. Mike puffed up like a proud rooster. Yeah, I've got some ideas already, Dad. We're gonna make this place huge. I sat there, fiddling with a loose thread on the couch, feeling invisible. Mom turned to me, her voice sharp like she was waking me up from a daydream. And what about you, Jenny? Ready to step up? You can handle the front desk, learn the ropes. I took a deep breath. It was now or never. Actually, I'm not going to work at the restaurant. I'm going to study landscape design, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The room went silent. Dad's face turned red, like a tomato about to burst. Landscape what now? He barked. That's no career for you. You're a part of this family, and the restaurant is our legacy. Mike snickered. What are you gonna do? Plant flowers for a living? I felt my cheeks burning. Yes, actually. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm good at it, and I love it. Mom's face was a mix of confusion and worry. Jenny, be sensible. You can't make a living off playing in the dirt. I stood up, feeling a surge of defiance. It's not just playing in the dirt, Mom. It's creating something beautiful, something real. I'm not asking for your approval, but I am telling you, this is my decision. Dad slammed his hand on the table, his voice booming. If you choose this foolishness, you're on your own. Don't expect any help from us. I felt a knot in my stomach, but my voice was steady. Fine, I'll do it on my own. Grandma Rose, who had been quietly knitting in the corner, finally spoke. Her voice was calm but carried weight. Joe, let the girl follow her heart. She's got a gift, and it would be a sin to waste it, she said, her eyes fixed on Dad. Dad let out a frustrated grunt, turning away. Fine, do what you want. But don't come crying to us when it all falls apart. I turned to leave the room, my heart pounding. Mike called out after me, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Good luck, gardener. Let's see how far those flowers get you. Stepping into college life felt like diving into deep water. It was thrilling, yet daunting. I, Jenny, was far from the familiar paths of my family's expectations, ready to carve my own way in the world of landscape design. I still remember the buzz of the first day in class, the room swirling with the energy of eager students. I found a spot in the back, trying to shrink into the shadows. That's when Zoe, a girl with fire engine red hair and eyes full of mischief, dropped into the seat next to me. Hey, there, newbie, I'm Zoe. First-timer in landscape design? I gave a shy nod. Yeah, I'm Jenny. It's all a bit overwhelming. Zoe's laugh was loud and genuine. You'll fit right in. Wait till you get your hands into the real dirt. It's epic. What dragged you into this world? I hesitated, the sting of my family's disapproval still fresh. I've always loved plants, the outdoors. It's where I feel right, you know? Her grin widened. Perfect place for you then. Classes were a whirlwind of learning and creating. I was absorbing things like a sponge, from the science of soils to the art of design. I was finally speaking a language I loved. After one particularly intense session, Mr. Davidson, our professor, a man as tall and sturdy as an oak, called me over. "Jenny, your designs, there's something else. You've got a real knack for this," he said, his voice serious but encouraging. I was stunned. "Really? Thank you, Mr. Davidson. I'm just trying to do my best." He leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "There's potential in you. Don't let it go to waste. Push harder." His words became my mantra. I started to live in the studio, my designs becoming more ambitious, more expressive. It was exhausting, but exhilarating. But even in those moments of joy, a part of me yearned for my family, despite everything. One quiet evening, I gathered the courage to call home. The phone rang, each tone heavy with anticipation. Finally, Mom's voice came through, sharp like a knife's edge. "What do you want, Jenny?" Her tone stung, but I pushed on. "I just wanted to check in, see how everyone is." She snorted, her voice dripping with scorn. "Oh, now you care? After running off to play in the dirt, abandoning your own family." I clenched my teeth, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I didn't abandon anyone, Mom. I just chose a different path." Her laugh was bitter. "A dead-end path, you mean? Don't expect us to be here waiting when it all crumbles around you." The call ended soon after, leaving a sour taste in my mouth. But it also fueled a fire in me. I dove back into my work with a new intensity, determined to prove not just to my family, but to myself, that I was on the right path. Life has a way of throwing curveballs, and mine came in the form of a phone call during my final year of college. It was Aunt Clara, my mom's sister, her voice shaky and strained. "Jenny, it's about your Grandma Rose. She passed away last night," Aunt Clara said, her voice cracking with emotion. I felt the ground slip away beneath me. Grandma Rose had been my rock, the one person who believed in my dreams. Losing her felt like losing a part of myself. The funeral was a somber affair. My family was there, all stiff and formal. Dad, Mom, and Mike looked like strangers to me. After the service, I overheard Mom talking to Aunt Clara. "I still can't believe she left that house to Jenny. What's she going to do with it? She can barely take care of herself," Mom said, her voice dripping with disapproval. I felt a surge of anger but bit my tongue. I didn't want a confrontation, not there, not then. The will reading was a few days later. Grandma Rose had left me her house, the beautiful garden haven where I had spent countless hours. My family was shocked, their whispers sharp as thorns. "Why would she leave it to Jenny? She's never around anyway," Mike muttered under his breath. Dad's face was like thunder. "This is ridiculous. That house could have been sold, put money into the restaurant." I stood up, my voice steady but firm. Grandma knew I loved that house, that garden. It was where we spent so much time together. I'm going to keep it, just as she wanted. Mom's response was cold and harsh. "So, you're just going to live there alone, playing in the dirt? What a waste." Their words stung, but I had made up my mind. I moved into Grandma's house, immersing myself in the garden she had loved so dearly. I started renovating the place, pouring my heart into every plant, every flower bed. As the months passed, I transformed Grandma's garden into something truly special. It became my sanctuary, a place where I could be myself, away from the judgment and expectations of my family. The day the invitation to Mike's wedding arrived at my doorstep was a day of mixed feelings. It was a fancy piece of paper, golden letters against a white background, representing a part of my life I had left behind. Staring at it, I felt a storm of emotions churn inside me. I decided to go, but on my terms. I dressed in a way that felt true to me, elegant but simple, a far cry from the dirt-stained clothes they remembered. Entering the restaurant, the sights and sounds of my past life engulfed me. I spotted my family across the room. Mom, Dad, and Mike, all decked out, looking like a picture-perfect family. I braced myself and walked over. "Jenny? I didn't think you'd accept the invitation." Mom's voice was sharp, cutting through the noise. "I came to see Mike get married." "It's a family event, isn't it?" I replied, trying to keep my voice level. Mike glanced at me, his smirk familiar and unwelcome. "What's the matter?" Ran out of bushes to trim. "Decided to play dress up for a change?" I felt a familiar sting, but I brushed it off. "I'm just here to wish you well, Mike." It was then that his bride, a tall woman with a haughty look, chimed in. "Oh, this is the infamous gardener sister? Did you manage to scrub the dirt from under your nails, dear, or is that your natural look?" Her words, sharp and mocking, hung in the air. I clenched my jaw, refusing to let her see how deep they cut. "I clean up just fine, thanks for asking." "Congratulations to you both." Dad's eyes were cold, his voice colder. "Your being here doesn't erase the past, Jenny. You chose your path." Their words were like thorns, but I had grown a thick skin. "I'm not here to rehash old arguments. Just wanted to wish Mike a happy married life." I was quickly ushered to a small table in the corner, away from the family. Sitting there, I could feel the curious stares and hushed whispers. "That's the gardener," they whispered, "the black sheep of the family." But as I sat there, a sense of pride welled up in me. Yes, I was the gardener, the one who had dared to follow her own path. I was no longer the shy, unsure girl they remembered, but a woman who had found her strength, who had bloomed in spite of them. My discomfort only grew as the evening stretched on. Sipping my drink, I tried to make myself invisible, but that plan fell apart when I caught the eye of some guys I knew from childhood, Mike's friends, the same ones who used to join him in mocking me. "Look who's here, the family's little dirt digger," one of them, Jake, jeered as they approached, a sneer plastered on his face. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Actually, it's landscape designer. But I wouldn't expect you to understand the difference." Their laughter was harsh, grating. "Oh, listen to her, thinks she's all high and mighty now. Chris," another one, added with a scoff. I bit back a sharp retort, my hands clenching under the table. "I've worked hard for my success. My job is more than just playing in the dirt." Their amusement was cut short when an elderly man at the next table interjected. He'd been listening, his expression growing increasingly disapproving. "I've seen this young lady's work. The new park downtown, that's hers. It's outstanding. Shows what you know." The group was visibly taken aback, their smugness faltering. Muttering under their breath, they slunk away, their egos bruised. Emboldened, I decided to venture out from my safe corner, mingling through the crowd, dodging glances and whispers. That's when I overheard Mike, speaking to a group of his friends. "She's always been the odd one, more into her plants than real work," Mike said, his voice laced with a mix of amusement and disdain. His friend laughed loudly. "Every family's got its black sheep, huh?" Their words were like a slap, raw and stinging. I walked away, my heart pounding, reminding myself their opinions didn't define me. As I weaved through the crowd, I bumped into my cousin Lucy, a quiet presence in our loud family. "Hey, Jenny. I've seen some of your designs. They're really something," she said, her voice sincere. I managed a small smile. "Thanks, Lucy. It means a lot, especially today." Lucy looked at me, her eyes understanding. "I never agreed with how they treated you. You're doing amazing things. I'm glad you stuck to your path." Her words were a small comfort amidst the thorns of the evening. We chatted briefly, a momentary respite from the tension. As Lucy drifted away, I returned to my corner, feeling the weight of the evening. The loud music, the clinking glasses, and the bursts of laughter around me felt like they were happening in a different world. I sat there, sipping my drink, longing for the celebration to end. The wedding night was winding down, its fancy aura overshadowed by my own tangled feelings. Just when I thought the night couldn't get any more surreal, the mayor, a distant relative of Mike's bride, took the stage for his speech. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's a delight to be here," he began, his voice booming across the room. "But tonight, I want to highlight a special guest among us, a true star in the world of landscape design, Jenny." Hearing my name, I almost choked on my drink. I stood up hesitantly, feeling like a deer caught in headlights. The mayor beamed at me. "Jenny here is the brilliant mind behind the transformation of our city park. She's a celebrated landscape designer who's won multiple awards for her incredible work. Let's give her the recognition she deserves." The room erupted into applause, a sound that felt foreign to me. I glanced at my family's table and saw them, their faces a mix of shock and embarrassment. Mike's bride leaned towards him, her voice dripping with disbelief. "Is he talking about your sister, the gardener?" Mike mumbled something, looking like he wished the floor would swallow him up. The mayor's praise continued. "Jenny's work has revitalized our city. She's a true talent." Amidst the clapping, I felt a surge of confidence. The mayor's words were like a light, dispelling the shadows of doubt and scorn from my family. Then, seizing the moment, I decided to speak up. "Thank you, Mayor, for your kind words. It's an honor to contribute to our city's beauty." I paused, my gaze sweeping over the crowd, settling on my family. "It's funny, isn't it? How life turns out. Mike, you and your bride are perfect for each other. Your shared talent for rudeness to others is quite remarkable." The room went silent, the air thick with tension. My parents, my brother, and his fiancée blushed deep red, their shame as visible as if I'd slapped them. Mom's voice cut through the silence, sharp as a knife. "Jenny, what are you saying? This is your brother's wedding." I met her gaze, unflinching. "Just speaking the truth, Mom. Something our family seems to struggle with." Mike stood up, his face red with anger. "You can't come here and talk to us like that." I held my ground, my voice steady. "I've earned my right to speak, Mike. Maybe it's time you all listened." The confrontation ended with Mike sitting down, defeated, and the room slowly buzzing back to life. The mayor gave me a nod of respect before moving on. As I sat back down, the weight of the night lifted slightly. I had spoken my piece, stood up for myself in a way I never had before. I was no longer just the gardener or the outcast, I was Jenny, a recognized landscape designer, someone who had grown past her family's narrow expectations. After Mike's wedding, word got out about my success as a landscape designer. People were buzzing about the awards I'd won and the projects I'd aced. It felt like stepping into the sunlight after years in the shadows. And then, my family came calling. One afternoon, while I was busy sketching out a new garden design, my phone rang. It was Mom. Her voice had a sweetness to it that felt out of place. "Jenny, darling, we've been hearing so much about your work. Your father and I are so proud of you," she cooed. I raised an eyebrow. "Really? That's a change of tune." There was a pause on the line. "Well, we were thinking, maybe you could come over. We'd love to see you, catch up on things." I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. "Catch up, or catch onto my bank account?" I shot back. Mom's voice faltered. "Jenny, that's not fair. We're family." The word family hit a nerve. Family? Like when you all but disown me for following my dreams. Seems like family matters when there's money in the picture. Before she could respond, I ended the call. I wasn't about to let them back into my life just because they smelled success. A few days later, there was a knock at my door. Mike was standing there, hands in his pockets, looking everywhere but at me. "Hey, Jenny, can we talk?" he mumbled. I crossed my arms. "This should be good. What do you want, Mike?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I know we haven't been great. But you're doing well, and I was wondering if you could, help me out a bit." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Help you out? After years of calling me the gardener and laughing at my ambitions. Mike's face reddened. "I didn't mean it like that. It's just that things are tough, and..." I cut him off. "Save it, Mike. I'm not your ATM. You and the family made it clear how you felt about me. You can't just waltz back into my life when it's convenient." He opened his mouth to argue, but I stopped him. "No, Mike. You made your bed. Now lie in it." After he left, I sat in my garden, surrounded by the beauty I had created. My phone rang a few more times over the next week, more attempts at reconciliation from my family, but I didn't answer. I was done with their fair-weather affection. I had built a life for myself, one that didn't need their validation or their greed. I was thriving in my own right, and that was all that mattered. They had chosen their path, and I had chosen mine. As I looked around at the plants and flowers that were a testament to my hard work and passion, I realized I had everything I needed right here. I was happy, successful, and free from the toxic ties that had once bound me. This wasn't just the end of a chapter, it was the beginning of a whole new book. My book. And I was going to make sure it was a bestseller, written on my own terms, in my own style. The new growth in my life was just starting, and I was ready for whatever came next.
I've longed for children, but you're the reason we couldn't have them. My husband spat out, hurling those hurtful words at me after 20 years of marriage. In that moment, I realized I couldn't continue with him. His callousness cut deep and his mind was elsewhere, dreaming of a new life without me. It felt as if